sunken ships filled with gold, including a Spanish galleon with 22 tons of gold and silver. This much gold today is worth about $2 billion, and this is the money from one ship alone. Archaeologist Alexandre Monteiro made this discovery almost by accident. He was studying some documents when he found some information about a ship that went missing in 1615, and he decided he wanted to find it. After many years, Alexandre found not just this specific ship, he actually discovered 8,620 shipwrecks in the waters of Portugal alone. Out of this number, 250 are gold-filled shipwrecks, a discovery that would make any Jack Sparrow shake in his boots. Most of these ships went down for boring reasons like the weather, but sometimes they were destroyed in battles, which may or may not have been super epic. They were carrying gold and other treasures from the New World to Europe, and of course, everyone wanted a share. Alexandre had been studying historical shipwrecks for 30 years now, so he has discovered many ships that went down in somewhat glorious ways. In 1816, for example, a ship of one of the richest men in Portugal sank in Australia, with an insane amount of 66,000 silver coins. This was the first ship from Portugal to ever plunge in the waters of Australia. The bad news is that these ancient sunken vessels, filled with riches and epic stories, are not so easy to reach. They're deep down in the ocean and covered by sand. You could still try, but that would be stealing part of a country's history, and you wouldn't want to be that person, would you? Naturally, Portugal was not the only country that explored the seas back then. The coast of Europe is packed with sunken ships filled with gold. In fact, there are about 1 million historical shipwrecks underwater right now, and the treasures abandoned under the sea might be worth around $60 billion. It's an insane amount of money, but let me tell you that these gold-filled sunken ships aren't really worth the hassle. There are many stories of maritime treasure discoveries that turned into insane lawsuits and even long jail time. Our first story starts in 1746, when a violent storm crashed a ship called Prince Deonti near an island in Brittany. The ship was filled with tea, ceramics, and 100 gold ingots. Of course, the owners of the ship tried to save the loot, but if it's not easy now, imagine how it was back in the 18th century. It took more than 200 years for the vessel to be found. It finally happened in 1975, when a group of French men discovered it and decided to take pretty much every valuable thing they could find. Now, I said these things were not worth the trouble for a reason. In France, if you find anything that can be historical, you must declare it to the local authorities within 48 hours. Fail to comply, and you will be committing something known as a crime. To be fair, our French friends here did declare their findings, but only the corroded cannons from the ship. And the gold? Well, they sold it. Obviously, because each gold bar is worth between $125,000 to $231,000. It took French authorities almost 50 years to retrieve the stolen gold, and they didn't retrieve all of it. Part of it was bought by an elderly couple living in Florida, and the crime is so serious they were charged for connection with money laundering, organized crime, and the trafficking of cultural goods. The poachers also sold some gold ingots to the British Museum collection. Now, let's go back to the 1850s, when a steamer called SS Central America traveled from Panama to California and back again. This was during the Californian Gold Rush, a time when 300,000 people moved to California to dig for gold. Because the travel route was not easy breezy, people needed to carry their gold around on big ships. This is where our friend SS Central America comes in. In 1857, the ship had 578 people on board and about 10 tons of gold. Very few survived, and around $100 to $150 million in gold went down with the ship. All of this explains why in 1988, a group of investors from Columbus decided to finance a research project to find this ship. The research was led by a guy named Tommy Thompson. Tommy was really crazy about the idea of finding this sunken ship filled with gold. It took him years to find the exact location of the SS Central America, especially because the ship was 7,500 feet beneath the surface of the Atlantic Ocean, and retrieving it required a lot of fancy tech. A group of 161 investors paid for his adventure, but it goes without saying that they were not doing this out of love from their hearts. They invested $12.5 million in this project because they were expecting to earn at least 10 times more. But since life is not all sunshine and rainbows, 39 insurance companies sued the research team as soon as they retrieved the gold. Back when the ship was up and running, these companies insured the cargo of the SS Central America, and when the cargo was finally retrieved, more than 100 years later, they wanted to be compensated. They said it was not their job to retrieve it, but that doesn't mean they abandoned it. This crazy talk didn't stick, and 92% of the gold was given to the research team. The plot thickened when the investors were scammed by none other than Tommy Thompson, who fled with $4.16 million. He also had 500 gold coins, but he's not telling a soul where they are. Nonsense like this is the reason why most countries have rules to protect cultural properties. And yes, sometimes shipwrecks can be a cultural property. Obviously, there are many maritime treasure discoveries that happen without breaking any laws. The SS City of Cairo, for example, was a steamship that submerged in 1929 with 2,000 boxes of silver coins weighing 122 tons. A company called Deep Ocean Search retrieved the coins from a depth of 17,000 feet, which is 4,500 feet lower than the Titanic. 34 million pounds went to the UK Treasury, and the Deep Ocean Search also got a share. The good news here is that some of the coins can be bought by collectors, legally. Paying for a treasure is probably the closest you can get to an underwater archaeology find. I know, all I did was destroy your piracy dreams. But while raiding gold-filled shipwrecks may be a crime in most countries, or just financially impossible for us mere mortals, not all hope is lost. There is about $771 trillion worth of gold lying on the ocean floor, and it doesn't have an owner. It's like an underwater gold mine, except the gold is in the water. You know how the water of the ocean is salty? Well, the gold gets mixed with the minerals in the water, so it's not like you stumble upon a gold nugget on the beach. Each liter of ocean water has 13 billionths of a gram of gold, and it's very difficult to extract such tiny particles of gold from the water. But that doesn't mean people haven't tried, and, of course, there's been a scam here too. In the 1890s, a guy claimed he had invented a thing that would suck gold from the seawater. When he got enough money, he fled the country with the cash. If you really want to get some gold, you could try to extract it from the Earth's core, which has 1.6 quadrillion tons of gold. There's 16 times more gold in the Earth's core than what humans have mined in the whole of history. No hoax involved here, because nobody has dared to go down there yet. With archaeologists discovering gold-filled sunken ships out and about, maybe we can make our own maritime treasure discoveries, or at least save enough money to buy some silver coins. A ship filled with gold and other treasures worth over $13 million was found in the middle of the Namibian desert after almost 500 years. The worker who found it was actually looking for diamonds, but ended up with something way more valuable for history. There were some blocks of copper, some wood, pipes, and elephant tusks. The miners called for an archaeologist, who soon realized it wasn't a disturbed beach like they thought, but a shipwreck. All evidence showed that it was a Portuguese trading vessel, Bom Jesus, that went missing in the 16th century. Experts believe it was a special kind of ship that was bigger, stronger, and better than older ships from Portugal and Spain. These ships were built to take Portuguese explorers on long trips to distant places like India, China, and Japan, and come back with tons of cargo. The Bom Jesus was likely carrying treasures from Lisbon, Portugal, to to western India. But it looks like on its way around the southern tip of Africa, near Namibia, a big storm pushed the ship too close to the shore. The ship hit a rock, tipped over, and broke apart, sinking into the ocean. Archaeologists found treasure from the captain's chest under the water, which probably fell out when the ship's wooden hull broke. They also found pieces of the ship scattered along the shore, likely from the violent storm and later by construction in the area. The storm must have been very fierce, but they didn't find many bones, which means most of the crew may have survived or were lost at sea. The ship was split into 3 sections and incredibly well preserved, thanks to the thick layers of sand that covered it and prevented rot. Archaeologists who studied the wreck discovered over 40 tons of cargo. There were cannons, swords, blocks of metal like lead and tin, fabrics, and tools that sailors used to navigate the stars while traveling across the ocean. The most exciting discovery was 1,845 copper ingots, weighing as much as 16 to 17 tons altogether. Those copper ingots, or pieces of pure metal, are still in great condition because the hull of the ship and layers of sand protected them from ocean water. The scientists even managed to read the trademarks on them on site and learned they were made by a super wealthy German trading company. There were also more than 2,000 shiny gold and silver coins from different countries, and 105 enormous elephant tusks weighing about 2 tons. The tusks were likely supposed to become luxury items, like jewelry or carvings at the destination. Archaeologists took some DNA samples from the tusks and found that they came from West African forests and savanna elephants. Researchers were lucky that the ship was found in a restricted diamond mining area. No scavengers were able to get their hands on the treasures. The Bom Jesus remains the oldest and most valuable shipwreck that was ever discovered off the western coast of sub-Saharan Africa. Another shipwreck recently found by accident was buried under a 10-foot tall sand dune near the Caspian Sea. Some people call it the world's largest lake, and it has water levels that rise and fall over time because of the changes in weather patterns. These changes can move sand and uncover things like this shipwreck and other treasures along the coast. As the dune slowly disappeared, the ship started to show. Before digging it out, scientists worried that waves from the sea might damage the wreck. To protect it, they built a wall using thousands of sandbags to keep the waves away. When the ship was uncovered, they discovered it was a 3-masted, 92-foot-long merchant ship with a strong double hull. Wood samples showed the ship was built in the 18th to 19th century using trees like Scots pine, spruce, and larch from the Volga River area or the Caucasus. They even found buckwheat and plants from the same region, which were probably traded or used to feed the sailors. It proves that the ship was part of a group of merchant ships that once sailed the Caspian Sea. An amateur fisherman who was 20 feet under the sea off the coast of Turkey noticed some huge metal remains. He had an underwater camera, so he made footage of the discovery and took it to scientists. They immediately started an investigation and learned that it must be a shipwreck from the first decades of the 20th century. It could be one of the Ottoman Empire ships that had an important mission to deliver supplies, but disappeared without a trace. Scientists got permission to study this Black Sea wreck in detail to learn more about its mysteries. They're hoping to find its shipyard documents to find some answers, as the ship itself is in terrible condition and is tricky to work with. Robot submersibles that belong to an oil and gas company noticed hundreds of intact ancient storage jars sitting on the seabed in the eastern Mediterranean. Experts think those jars are 3,300 years old. This makes the find the oldest shipwreck from the deep sea. The jugs were probably used to store oil or other agricultural products like fruit. This proves that the people who made them organized maritime trade and had incredible navigational skills. It looks like the ancient mariners managed to traverse the Mediterranean Sea without a line of sight to any coast. All they could see was the horizon, so they must have used the sun and other stars to find their way. Off the coast of Sicily, under 20 feet of sand and rock. Archaeologists found a shipwreck so old that they aren't even sure what materials were used to build it. They think the ship is from the 5th or 6th century BCE, which means it's over 2,500 years old. This ancient ship wasn't alone. Researchers also found 2 iron anchors shaped like an upside-down T from around the 7th century of the Common Era, and 4 stone anchors from prehistoric times nearby. One of the stone anchors was broken and may have had wooden pieces attached to help it hold on to the seafloor. They figured out that the ship itself was built using the on-shell technique. The wooden planks of the ship were connected so tightly that they could support the ship on their own, with extra beams added just to make it stronger. Sadly, the ship's wooden hull is very fragile now because tiny sea creatures that eat wood have damaged it over the years. Scientists are being extra careful as they study it to make sure it doesn't fall apart. This discovery is such a big deal because it was built during a time when Sicily was super important for trade. Back then, the Greeks and Punics were trying to take control of the seas long before Rome became the ruler of the Mediterranean. By studying this ship, scientists hope to learn more about how people traveled and traded in those ancient times. One more shipwreck, this time off the coast of Kenya. Could be from Vasco da Gama's final voyage. This Portuguese explorer was the first European to reach India by sea around the Cape of Good Hope. Local fishermen discovered the shipwreck in question in 2013. When an underwater archaeologist came to check it out, he found some treasures at the spot: elephant tusks and valuable copper ingots. If this find really has to do with Vasco da Gama, then it must be from the 16th century. It was the year of his 3rd and final voyage to India. Da Gama led a huge fleet of 20 ships, one of which was the São Jorge. Most of the ship is hidden under layers of coral, and a whole team of scientists are carefully digging trenches to find parts of the ship's wooden frame and hull.
Just like Jack Sparrow from the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, Captain Kidd was a pirate who sailed around looking for treasure. Only he was less charming and more dangerous. As the legend goes, he was so protective of his loot that he is still out there, guarding it as a ghost. William Kidd, who became famous as Captain Kidd, was born around the 1650s. He told people his birthplace was Dundee, Scotland, but many people think it was a lie. When he was a young man, Kidd settled in New York City. He became friends with powerful people, including 3 governors. Some stories suggest he started his maritime adventures as a rookie on a pirate ship before becoming a well-known sailor. By 1689, Kidd had already become part of a pirate crew. When they were sailing in the Caribbean, Kidd and other men on the ship rebelled. They overpowered the captain and renamed their ship Blessed William, making Kidd the new captain. Kidd gained experience and even assisted certain countries during battles. Once, the governor didn't pay the crew for their services, and Kidd and his team attacked a French island, Marie Galante, and looted it, collecting a huge amount of money. In 1691, Kidd married a woman named Sarah Bradley, who was one of the richest women in New York. She had been married twice before him and was a widow. Her money came as an inheritance from her previous husbands. A few years later, the man in charge of New York, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire asked Captain Kidd to go after some pirates. This wasn't just any request. It had the support of the king and carried a lot of importance. If Kidd had said no, people would have thought he was disloyal and looked down on him. This was the start of the journey that made Captain Kidd famous as a pirate and a character in stories. This trip was funded by a few noble lords who were some of the most powerful people in England at that time. The king himself signed a letter that gave Kidd permission to be a privateer, which is basically a pirate who can do all piratey things with a legal license. This letter said that 10% of the treasure he may find would go to the king. To get some extra cash for the trip, Kidd had to sell one of his ships, the Antigua, and for his special voyage, Kidd got a new ship called the Adventure Galley. It was perfect for chasing pirates, with 34 cannons, oars, and a crew of 150 men. The oars were handy because they let the ship move even when the wind wasn't blowing. Kidd was very picky about his crew, choosing only the best and most loyal officers. But as the Adventure Galley sailed, something strange happened. Kidd was expected to salute a Navy yacht, but he did not. So, the Navy yacht fired a shot to show Kidd he needed to pay respect. But Kidd and his crew decided to do the opposite. They turned around and slapped their backsides in disrespect. After this, the Navy captain got angry and took many of Kidd's crew members to work for the Navy, even though privateer crews were usually free from this obligation. Kidd, short of men, sailed to New York, where he captured a French ship. To replace his lost crew, he hired a lot of known criminals, some of whom were likely former pirates. In September 1696, Captain Kidd set sail for the Cape of Good Hope in Africa. His journey faced troubles right from the start. Cholera caused many of his crew to get sick and pass away. Even worse, their brand new ship started to have lots of leaks. Kidd was also on a mission to catch some pirates in the Indian Ocean, but he couldn't find them. As his big plan started falling apart, Kidd got desperate to make money to cover his costs. The worst happened a few months later. Kidd attacked one of his own crew members because the man wanted to board a Dutch ship, but it would have been considered an act of piracy. The man passed away due to his injury. Things were going downhill fast for Kidd, and a Royal Navy officer declared him a pirate. Kidd changed his ship's flag to look like it was French and captured a big Indian ship called the Quedagh Merchant. It was loaded with valuable stuff like silk, gold, and silver. Kidd decided to keep the Quedagh Merchant and sailed to Madagascar. There he met another pirate named Robert, who had taken Kidd's ship years ago. There are two different stories about how it went. One says Kidd was nice to him, and the other says Kidd was scared and wanted to wait for his backup to attack. But whatever the case, most of Kidd's crew left him to join Robert. Kidd decided to give up and go back home. He left his old ship, the Adventure Galley, behind as it was falling apart. Before he set it on fire, he took all valuables from it and boarded the Adventure Prize. The British authorities had a law that offered pardons to pirates in the Indian Ocean, but they made sure Kidd couldn't get one. They didn't want to forgive him because he was connected to some powerful people in England. Kidd found out he was wanted as soon as he reached Anguilla, and he couldn't use the pardon. The government had changed, and new leaders wanted to use him to make their rivals look bad. They thought Kidd would spill the beans about his powerful supporters. However, Kidd refused to reveal any names, believing that his friends would come to his rescue, but they failed him. Some say he might have escaped punishment if he had talked, but he didn't. Kidd was sent to London to stand trial before the High Court of Admiralty. They accused Kidd of piracy on the high seas and the accident with a crew member. While he waited for his trial, he was locked up in the notorious Newgate prison. They found him guilty on all counts and sentenced him to public execution, though many questioned if the evidence was enough for such a harsh verdict. He was executed on May 23, 1701. His body was displayed over the River Thames for 3 years as a warning to anyone thinking about becoming a pirate. Some of Kidd's crewmen were supposed to be punished in the same way, but they were set free before their executions. The loot Captain Kidd had collected over the years made people believe he must have hidden it somewhere. This sparked loads of treasure hunts in different places. Some people say that Kidd might have hidden the treasure on the Rahway River in New Jersey, just across from Staten Island. Evidence suggests that Captain Kidd hid a small stash of treasure on Gardiner's Island, near New York. It was supposedly found and sent to England as proof against Kidd in his trial for piracy. Around the Bay of Fundy, people have been looking for Kidd's treasure since at least 1875. They believed he hid it there during his time as a privateer. There's a place on the island called Money Cove because of these stories. Considering how Kidd met his sad and unfair fate, it's not surprising that people have claimed to see the ghost of Captain Kidd. Some people reported spotting him at Trinity Churchyard as if he was searching for his own grave. There's also a story of two men who tried to look for Kidd's jewels in 1825. They actually found a treasure box. But before they could crack it open, the ghost of Captain Kidd himself rose up from the ground next to the treasure chest. This sight was so terrifying that it made the men pass out. Both of them claimed to have seen a truly creepy figure emerge from the earth. It breathed out sulfur fumes and seemed to glide over the ground. Thankfully, there is no solid evidence that confirms these ghost stories.
If you come across a well in Portugal, resist the temptation to gaze into its depths. The inverted tower in the enigmatic city of Sintra sends chills through those who encounter it as it spirals down a daunting 88 feet into the underground. It certainly wasn't designed to collect water, yet its true purpose remains a closely guarded secret. Dating back to around 1904, this well could have been involved in a mysterious initiation tradition from the Knights Templar. The Templars had faded into history almost 6 centuries before the construction of this pit, but their enigmatic traditions were revived by later generations. So one theory says that candidates seeking to join the group back then had to confront their deepest fears by facing this well, descending its spiral staircase blindfolded. When they reached the bottom of the inverted tower, they removed their blindfolds and were faced with this frightening sight. The only way out of this dark labyrinth was to keep looking up and following the light. Now imagine yourself browsing the shelves of a used bookstore until you find a book with an alphabet you've never seen before. You decide to use an image translation app but find no matches. Intrigued, you buy the book. Then you show it to your friends and family, but nobody recognizes that alphabet. Rare book dealer Winfried Vonnig probably experienced the same frustration back in 1912, when he acquired what would later become the most enigmatic book in the world. The work is known today as the Voynich manuscript, and it's written entirely in an unknown language that no one has deciphered yet. The pages of this 15th century codex are filled with botanical drawings, but these aren't typical daisies or roses. In fact, they don't resemble any plant species that we know of. What makes things even stranger is the illustrations of unfamiliar constellations and women swimming in green baths. Delving deeper into the realm of mysterious texts, we set off on a journey to the Qumran Caves near the Salt Sea in the Middle East. In 1952, a team of archaeologists stumbled upon 2 scrolls made of highly oxidized copper at the site. Unrolling them was a major challenge, so they decided to cut the scrolls into 23 parts to investigate them. Imagine their surprise to see Hebrew words like gold and silver popping up. But no, it wasn't an ancient invoice. It was more like a treasure map, pointing the way to over $1 million. Unfortunately, the treasure was never found. Not for lack of trying, though. You see, the quest isn't as easy as it may appear. Some of the copper scroll's vocabulary is technical, and some geographical locations remain a mystery. There's also one last possibility. Perhaps it's all a work of fiction, like a pirate tale from the old days. People talk about Mona Lisa's almost haunting stare that seems to follow you no matter where you stand. But here's a quick question. Does she have eyebrows? You got it right if you said no, and her complete lack of eyebrows adds another layer of mystique to her gaze. The most common explanation is that beauty standards were different, and perhaps plucking the hairs above the eyes was a thing around 1503. But take a look at other Italian paintings from that time, like La Schiavona or Portrait of a Young Girl. Yep, eyebrows. So, not everyone was entirely pleased with this theory, like French inventor Pascal Cote. He spent 3,000 hours analyzing scans of the painting to dig through all the layers of Leonardo da Vinci's masterpiece. Now he claims that the Mona Lisa once had eyebrows, but they disappeared over time due to cleanings and restorations. Some historians, however, still question his findings, which means that Mona Lisa's style, or lack of it, remains an unsolved mystery. So, you decide to travel to Rio de Janeiro, and everyone tells you that Sugarloaf Mountain is a must-see. When you spot the mountain from a distance, you realize that the stone has a cavity. But around noon, the whole view changes. The shadow in that cavity takes the shape of a bird, an ibis to be precise. A local legend links this bird shape to the ancient Egyptian deity Thoth, as if the ancient Egyptians once visited Rio de Janeiro and were somehow inspired by the natural phenomenon. But it's probably just a big coincidence. I mean, literally. The real mystery, however, lies in the waters around Sugarloaf Mountain. In the 80s, archaeologist Robert Marks got a tip from locals about a treasure hidden beneath Guanabara Bay. He dove in and found quite a few Roman amphorae. You know, those ancient vases with two handles? His discovery could potentially provide evidence of a Roman shipwreck that might have reached Brazil 17 centuries before the Portuguese even set foot there. However, he couldn't proceed with his research, and to this day, the idea of the Roman presence on Brazil's coast remains uncertain. The true location of Cleopatra's tomb isn't the only ancient Egyptian mystery. Many secrets are carved into the walls of ancient structures, like in the Temple of Seti I. Take a close look at this hieroglyph, and you'll notice that it resembles a modern-day helicopter. Look to the right, and you'll see an engraving that looks like a submarine. Odd, right? The most reasonable explanation for this has to do with the legacies of different rulers. When a new pharaoh came to power, they had their own hieroglyphs added over the original ones. But this is still a topic of debate, as some Egyptologists believe that these mysterious hieroglyphs may represent some kind of ancient technology. The same applies to the Dendera light. The image found in the underground passageway of the Hathor Temple is a subject of significant controversy in Egyptian history. Some researchers suggest that the inscription simply represents a rising sun, while others interpret it as evidence of some kind of modern lighting system. And it does indeed resemble Crookes' tube, one of the early experiments with electrical discharges. Although there's no concrete evidence of ancient Egyptians having modern electricity, some historians believe that this theory could help explain why many discovered tombs don't have any residues left behind from the use of oil lamps or candles. A lot has been said about the mysterious pyramids of Egypt, but many people tend to forget that other inexplicable structures had already existed even before them. Our next stop takes us to Turkey. The top of a hill known as Göbekli Tepe, near the city of Urfa, holds an ancient secret. It features more than 20 circular stone enclosures dated back over 11,000 years. Many of these have heavily carved stone T-shaped pillars adorned with eerie human figures with folded hands. The most accepted theory is that it's the world's first temple, likely used for rituals or social events. But the greatest mystery lies in how it was built, as this site existed before the domestication of animals or the use of metal tools. So the construction must have been very difficult, challenging our understanding of the historical timeline. Now, I hope you're not afraid of heights, because we're about to take a flight over the Nazca Lines. You've probably already heard about these massive, mysterious drawings etched into an arid region of Peru. They come in many different shapes, like a spider, a monkey, and even a Google-eyed ET that is probably just a fisher. Anyway, this story got some fresh chapters in 2022 when an additional 168 new drawings were discovered. The original ones could only be seen from the air, but these new ones are much smaller and can be observed from the ground. However, one thing they have in common is that their purpose remains totally unclear. Some might call them the largest scale calendar in the world, Others suggest that they served as a tool for agricultural purposes. Of course, many theories have emerged in an attempt to give the Nazca Lines a meaning, but the truth is that they remain some of the most important unsolved mysteries in history.
It all happened in 1708. On June 8th, the Spanish galleon San Jose was going back home to Spain from the Caribbean. In total, there were 17 ships. The captain of the San Jose knew they were in for some trouble, as English ships were lurking in that area. He knew they would be after the treasure loaded on the ships. The price of the treasure from the New World was so astronomical that it could turn the course of historic events in Europe upside down. In order to be safe, the Spanish galleon was to reach Cartagena de Indias. It's where we have Colombia now. But sadly, other things were predestined for the San Jose. The 4 English ships appeared. The galleon couldn't just escape them. There was no choice but to turn around and fight. Then all the chaos started. Red flags showing that the battle started. Firing cannons, the smell of gunpowder. Nobody knows exactly how it all ended. As dusk fell, it was hard to see clearly what was happening. The only thing that remained in history was the sinking flagship San Jose. Then, silence. No wonder that San Jose, being the flagship, was the most strategically important galleon. She would carry an insane amount of precious metals, such as gold and silver, pearls, and gems, such as emeralds. All of that went to stay on the bottom of the ocean for the next 3 centuries. But how come this lost treasure got so legendary? First off, the financial estimates made by scientists shocked people. The ship reportedly carried 7 million to 12 million pesos. Let's translate that to today's money. Yeah, it may not be the wealth that Elon Musk has, but it's around $10 billion. With that money, you could treat yourself to a couple of private jets, a whole car park of Lamborghinis, and a posh mansion. And you'd still have a lot of money left. You may think it all must have gotten rusty, just like the bits and pieces found in the Titanic. But when it comes to gold, things work differently. The Titanic didn't carry gold, or at least not that much of it. The jewels that were on the Titanic were personal belongings. And the cool thing about gold is that it never reacts with oxygen. It means that real gold won't rust or tarnish. So if your golden necklace got somewhat darker, it's a telltale sign it's not pure gold. It's an alloy, which is also cool, by the way, as you can easily clean it. Going back to San Jose's lost treasure, the golden coins there, even over 300 years later, were supposed to look the same way as the day they were minted. Now, going back to the place where the ship supposedly sank, remember I told you the captain wanted to go to the shore where Colombia is today? Well, on December 4th, 2015, the ship was indeed found in the waters of Colombia. As with many other important things today, the world learned about it from a tweet. It was sent by the Colombian then-president Juan Manuel Santos. People have been looking for the San Jose for decades, and once it was finally found, it only got more popular, and even more myths about it began to appear. One of the legends was told by Senor Santos himself. After the wreck had been found, there was a short radio interview. Thing is, the discovery was pretty unexpected. Many people spent a lot of time and effort looking for that wreck, and many of them even gave up hope of ever finding it. Juan Manuel Santos told a story about how the wreck had been discovered. There was an official event outside Colombia where he was accosted by a man. He looked like the famous writer Hemingway. He sported a white beard and had white hair. The only thing that Hemingway-looking man wanted was 2 minutes of Santos's time. The president conceded and listened to the man. What happened next was unbelievable. The man pulled out an antique map, more precisely, a carefully framed copy, and told the president that no one else knew about it. The man pointed to one exact spot. He said that it was the exact location of the treasure, and that that place didn't appear on any other map. he guaranteed that he knew where the treasure was. The story sounded crazy and swashbuckling. Whoever that man was, he turned out to be right. His identity remains a mystery for everyone, but somehow that man found the funding, determined the area to be inspected, and even made his way to meet the president. Right, the San Jose was stuffed with gold, and whoever found it would get filthy rich for the rest of their life. But let's face it, there's no way an ordinary person could ever discover such a treasure, as it requires too much effort and too much funding. But what if you're into treasure hunting and you want to go and find some treasure chests somewhere? Well, I guess I have a story about ordinary people looking and even eventually finding real treasure. Meet Forrest Fenn, an eccentric millionaire who hid a $1 to $5 million treasure. The exact worth was unidentified. You see, even Mr. Fenn himself said he never tried to appraise it. Inside the chest, there were 265 American gold eagles and double eagles, ancient coins, gold nuggets, you name it. Forrest stashed the chest in the Rocky Mountains and announced the treasure hunt back in 2010. Now let's focus on a map for a little bit and see how vast the Rocky Mountains are. Basically, the treasure hunters were supposed to sweep the two countries, both the USA and Canada. At first, it was a small treasure hunt with only a couple of people who knew about it. But sometime later, there was pretty much a competition, as tens of thousands of people set off to look for the treasure. There was research stating that over the decade, about 350,000 people tried their luck looking for the mystery chest. To announce the hunt, Forrest Fenn used a poem made up of 24 lines. The poem had some hints in it that most treasure hunters failed to decode. It was so well hidden that it took 10 years to finally discover it. There was also a blog called Thrill of the Chase, and on June 6, 2020, Mr. Fenn finally posted the long-awaited news. The treasure had been found. Forrest himself admitted that anyone who read the instructions from the poem carefully could find the treasure. The poem created a lot of buzz on the internet, with many users trying to decode the 9 hints the poem had. Some of them even suggested the possible keys to decode the puzzle. Those speculations might have helped the person who eventually found the treasure. At first, even Forrest Fenn himself didn't know who cracked all the codes in the poem, made it through the dense forest, and retrieved the chest. The lucky finder preferred to stay anonymous, and all we initially knew was that it was a man from the eastern United States. The winner sent a photograph to Forrest Fenn, and thus the treasure hunt was officially over. Sometime later, though, he revealed himself. It was Jack Stewart, a former journalist and medical student. The treasure was hidden under a canopy of stars in a forest in the Rocky Mountains. The vegetation there is lush, so the chest was hidden deep within. The chest had never been moved from the place where it was originally hidden. The exact location is still unknown, but we know that the treasure was hidden in Wyoming. Jack admitted that not all the advertised treasures were found in the chest. A small gold frog on a necklace and a Spanish emerald ring were missing. Forrest indeed found the frog in his collection and gave it to Stewart, but he failed to find the ring. The treasure hunt created by Forrest Fenn may seem extravagant, but he explained why he decided to start it. The only thing he claimed to have in mind was to give people some hope. They say this place is swarming with money. It's been stored there for centuries, but no one managed to take it away from this island. Treasure hunters have been bewitched with this place since 1795. Many people have tried their luck looking for the treasure that could be hidden there by the Spanish pirates or even by the Knights Templar. But today, it's impossible to get there, as it's a private place, so all you can do is book an ocean tour around this island. Otherwise, you can take a peek at it in a TV reality show starring the Legina brothers, Rick and Marty, who are a team of enthusiasts looking for the treasures of Oak Island in Nova Scotia, Canada. Yeah, seems like there's no place where TV producers can't get to. One of the most famous discoveries out there was the so-called Money Pit. Despite the promising name, it wasn't full of money. Now we have to jump to 200 years ago. The Money Pit was first found by a 16-year-old kid in 1795. One day, Daniel McGinnis went fishing at Oak Island. He saw a tree there. Unsurprisingly, it was an oak, and it had weird markings. They didn't seem to be natural, so Daniel decided to check the area. He then saw a sunken patch of ground and started digging immediately. His two friends helped him out, but instead of treasures, the guys only found logs placed underground at regular intervals. It looked like a place where someone could hide money or jewels, but nothing precious was found. However, there was something curious down that pit. Someone found a granite stone there, and it had an engraved inscription on it. There were many attempts to decode it, but most of them ended up in failure. There's one translation though, and it says, 40 feet below, 2 million pounds are buried. Yeah, McGinnis and his friends should have dug harder. The next fun thing about the Money Pit is the coconut fiber found down there. They say that large amounts of this fiber were found at a depth of 60 feet. It may not surprise you, but I have to remind you of one thing. Oak Island is in Nova Scotia, Canada. Coconut trees do not grow there. The nearest one is about 1,500 miles from Nova Scotia, which makes it obvious that someone brought this fiber purposefully. Researchers came up with an idea that coconut fiber could have been used to make ropes and lower all the treasures down the pit. Next up, we have not one, but two mysteries. In the late 1800s, the Oak Island Treasure Company was thoroughly inspecting and excavating the island. Everyone believed something enormous was hidden there. These guys managed to drill 153 feet underground. That's like 15 stop signs stacked one on top of the other. You might have guessed that they didn't find pounds of gold and diamonds, but they found a manuscript. There's a theory claiming that it's one of Shakespeare's lost manuscripts. Some scientists believe that it was hidden there by the writer and scientist Francis Bacon, the true author of Shakespeare's works. Yeah, rumor has it was Francis and not William who wrote all the plays and sonnets. But there's no proof it was really so. The Money Pit may be the most popular shaft on Oak Island, but it's not the only one, and it's not the first. Before the Money Pit discovery, treasure hunters were drilling at Smith's Cove. While damming there, they found a wooden piece. It was a U-shaped formation that had Roman numerals. After a more thorough inspection, the specialists realized it was supposedly dated to 1769. The Money Pit was discovered 26 years later. This fact created many speculations that this structure might have been part of the real shaft with treasures everyone was looking for. Now, look at this Templar coin. It wasn't the first discovery on the island, but it was crucial in some way. Even if it may not sound like a big deal today, in medieval times, those coins would amass an insane amount of wealth. They were typically stored in European fortresses. For the treasure hunters, this coin was a sure sign there was more to be found on the island. The logic is simple. If there's one coin of that kind, there must be something else. And they were right. It wasn't the only Templar discovery. On the southwest shore of the island, a crossbow bolt was found. Experts say it dates back to the 13th century. But, once again, that wasn't something the treasure hunters were after. Some more coins were found on the island. Rick and Marty Legina retrieved this precious piece from a swamp. The coin is made of copper, and this time, it originated from Spain. When it was found, the Legina brothers could only see the number 8 engraved on it. But later on, some experts studied this coin and claimed it was made sometime around the 17th century. They managed to clean it well and saw the date 1652 engraved on the back of this coin. There's a theory stating that Spanish explorers found some treasure but hid it instead of taking it to the king. So maybe this coin just dropped out of the chest full of coins and jewels and is part of the treasure everyone was after. Or someone could have accidentally lost it while looking for the treasure. Who knows? One more famous treasure hunter is Gary Drayton. Gary and his team, together with Rick Legina, came across 2 coins while metal detecting the island. Those were 17th century King Charles II Britannia coins. One of them had a very clear inscription on it, stating that the coin was minted back in 1771. Another swamp treasure of possibly Spanish origin is also here. This time, it's a silver ring. A specialist studied it closely and reported that it had been repaired twice. The ring was once made bigger, and it was also made smaller ones. It's decorated with a floral design, which was popular in Europe in the 1730s. Among all the other curious things, Rick and Marty Legina found a silver button at Isaac Point. The button's pretty old. It supposedly dates back to the middle of the 18th century, and the notorious money pit was discovered later. This is why it wasn't a big deal of a find. It could simply belong to some farmer peacefully raising livestock on the island. There's no official record of any chest full of gems and coins found on Oak Island, but enthusiasts did find some jewels there. First off, the team found a brooch with a magnificent red gem. They mistakenly thought it was a ruby, but a professional gemologist stated it was a garnet. The piece was made of silver, and it's pretty old. Experts believe it was made around the 15 or 1600s. Another brooch they found didn't have any gems on it, but it had an intricate design. It's a brooch with a leaf design and an ornate rope. There are 13 branches of the leaf, which instantly created more mystery to the whole treasure hunting. First off, there's a carving with a 13-branched tree on a rock on the north shore of this island. What's more, many people believe that the number 13 is important to the Knights Templar. The enthusiasts also found a brooch not far away from the place where Daniel McGinnis, the guy who found the money pit, lived. The brooch was shown to a professional gemologist, Charles Luton Brain. He had to break it to the team that there were no gems adorning this piece of jewelry. In fact, the stone that seemed to be a gem was just a piece of glass. It was processed using a special technique though, so it was leaded glass. The enthusiasts decided to study the brooch even more and found out that part of the brooch was made of gold. The specialists claim that the brooch dates back to the 14th century. Was it the treasure everyone was looking for?
Guess what? A treasure that was thought to be lost forever has been found. Back in April 2015, Deep Ocean Search, a team of treasure hunters, recovered 50 million pounds worth of silver rupee coins from the British steamship. The ship sank in the 40s during its journey from India to England. The wreck was found at a whopping depth of almost 17,000 feet, setting a world record for the deepest recovery ever. To put that into perspective, the famous Titanic wreck is only found at a depth of 12,500 feet. But don't be duped. This was no easy feat. The team faced multiple breakdowns of their systems due to the pressure, temperature, and repeated dives at such a depth. Did you hear about the epic treasure found on the Black Swan wreck? It was discovered by Odyssey Marine Exploration in 2007 off Gibraltar, and they hit the jackpot. The salvage team found a whopping 17 tons of coins worth $500 million. Can you even imagine that much money? It's said to be the biggest haul ever found in the treasure hunting world. But the crew didn't spill the beans on where they found it or what kind of coins they uncovered. They just hightailed it back to the US with their loot. Sneaky. An old man in the Dominican Republic was selling a coin that ended up being the oldest coin ever minted in the New World. And that's just the start of the craziest shipwreck story ever. The team at Deep Blue Marine used some fancy sonar to search the area where the coin was found, and they stumbled upon parts of a wrecked ship. They also found jade statues, ancient Mayan bling, and gold coins from way back in 1535. Like, one set of 4 coins alone is worth a cool $1 million. The crew got to keep half of their booty while the Dominican Republic authorities snagged the rest. It's believed the ship sank during a gnarly hurricane just a few years after Columbus discovered the New World. No other shipwreck has ever turned up such ancient artifacts. We all heard about the Titanic, the OG shipwreck, known for its epic tragedy when it hit an iceberg in 1912. But what's even crazier is that $300 million worth of diamonds went down with it. Like, can you imagine? American and French researchers who found the ship auctioned off nearly 6,000 items recovered from the wreck. We're talking diamond bracelets, fancy dishes, and even a postcard a passenger wrote to their parents. Treasures from the Titanic are still popping up for auction. Like, some deck chairs from the first-class promenade deck were auctioned off for £85,000. They're too delicate to sit on now, but still a crazy piece of history. The Schmidts, a family of treasure hunters, just stumbled upon over $1 million worth of gold artifacts in shallow waters only 30 miles north of West Palm Beach. And get this, one of the coins was even meant for the King of Spain. These treasures were part of the 1715 treasure fleet that sank 300 years ago due to a massive hurricane after leaving Havana, Cuba. Can you believe it was only 15 feet deep in the water? They found 51 gold coins and 40 feet of ornate gold chain. Talk about hitting the jackpot. Brent Brisbane, the owner of 1715 Fleet Queen's Jewels, LLC, said those finds were important not just for their monetary value, but their historical importance. But there's more. The ship was recovered over 50 years ago, and divers have only found about $50 million worth of treasure. It's believed that there's still over $400 million worth of treasure hiding below the sea. The ultimate party of exploration just got a little more exciting. We're talking about Vasco da Gama's Esmeralda, the oldest shipwreck from Europe's age of exploration, baby. This bad boy was wrecked in a gnarly storm back in 1503 along the India route from Europe and the Arabian Sea. But wait, it gets better. The wreck was actually found way back in 1998, but it took almost 2 decades to excavate it. And guess what? They found rare coins, a ship bell, and other cool artifacts that confirm the identity of the ship. And the treasures are still being uncovered. Just last year in 2017, they discovered a unique navigational tool called an astrolabe at the wreck. How cool is that? A bunch of Indonesian fishermen found a super old ship from the 9th century off Belitung Island in 1998. It proved that trading between China and the Middle East was totally a thing back then thanks to the maritime Silk Route. The wreck is so cool that it's also known as the Tang treasure because it's the biggest collection of Chinese Tang dynasty artifacts ever found in one spot. But there's some serious drama going down over an exhibition of these priceless treasures. It's like a battle between commercial treasure salvage and archaeological preservation of shipwrecks. Who will win? Only time will tell. Meet the holy grail of shipwrecks. It's the Spanish galleon San Jose, and it was loaded with silver, gold, and emeralds worth billions of dollars today. But get this, it sunk after a battle with British ships off the coast of Cartagena, Colombia, way back in 1708. Crazy, right? But here's the kicker. 300 years later, in 2015, some awesome peeps discovered the wreck on the ocean floor. The Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution used a cool underwater vehicle to identify the ship by its distinctive cannons, and they're still recovering treasure as we speak. So, if you're feeling lucky, keep your eyes peeled for other hidden treasures that haven't been found yet. The ultimate jackpot, the sunken motherlode of the Nuestra Señora de Atocha, was discovered off the coast of Key West, Florida in July 1985. Mel Fisher, the legendary treasure hunter, spent a whopping 16 years searching for it. The Atocha was on a mission to bring back loads of riches to Spain from Havana, Cuba back in 1622, but got caught up in a gnarly hurricane. To celebrate the 30th anniversary of the discovery, there was a sick auction where people could buy pieces of the Atocha's treasure, like gold and emeralds. If you're keen to see more of this epic haul, head to the Mel Fisher Maritime Museum in Key West. The whole shebang is worth around $450 million, no biggie. Hey, have you ever dreamt of finding buried treasure and becoming a millionaire overnight? Well, guess what? It's not just a dream. Meet Forrest Fenn, the man who hid a chest filled with $1 to $5 million worth of treasure in the Rocky Mountains. And get this, it took 10 years for someone to finally find it. Fenn announced the treasure hunt back in 2010, and over the years, tens of thousands of people set off to look for it. The treasure chest was filled with 265 American gold eagles and double eagles, ancient coins, gold nuggets, and more. but finding it wasn't easy. Fenn used a poem with 24 lines that had hints in it, and it took some serious decoding skills to figure out where the treasure was hidden. Finally, in June 2020, the long-awaited news came. The treasure had been found. The lucky winner was Jack Stueff, a former journalist and medical student. The treasure was hidden under a canopy of stars in the forest in the Rocky Mountains, and it was so well hidden that not all the advertised treasures were found in the chest. But don't let that stop you from trying your luck at finding buried treasure. Who knows? Maybe you'll be the next lucky winner. And if you need some inspiration, just remember that Forrest Fenn's only goal was to give people some hope. So why not give it a shot and see what you can find? Who knows, maybe you'll become a millionaire too.
There's a stretch of water that even the most experienced explorers fear. No matter what season you choose to cross it in, you risk meeting face to face with waves that can reach as tall as the Hollywood sign. I'm talking about the Drake Passage, the waterway connecting the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean, stretching from Cape Horn at South America's southernmost tip to Antarctica's South Shetland Islands. It's about as wide as the distance from London to Berlin and takes up to 48 hours to cross. Some sailors compare getting on the other side to going to the moon. That's how challenging it is. Even the man who discovered it, Sir Francis Drake, never sailed these waters because they seemed too dangerous to him and opted for a calmer, although longer, Strait of Magellan. The passage took the lives of around 20,000 sailors and over 800 ships. Tourists who want to see Antarctica cross the Drake Passage on a regular basis, although it's still often called the world's most terrifying ocean crossing. The Antarctic Peninsula, where travelers go, isn't really part of Antarctica itself. It sticks out and points towards South America like two fingers almost touching it. The water gets squeezed between these two land masses, making strong ocean currents. The passage is part of the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, the largest ocean current on Earth. The water rushes through the passage at a speed between 95 and 150 million cubic meters per second, which makes it rougher. And then there are winds that usually blow from west to east and are very strong between 40 and 60 degrees latitude. That's why those areas are called the Roaring Forties, Furious 50s, and Screaming 60s. Land slows down winds, which is why storms hitting Ireland and the UK get weaker as they move east. But Drake's latitude is the only place where winds can blow all around the Earth without being stopped by land. So they keep getting faster. These strong winds turn into huge waves that can hit ships really hard, normally around 13 to 16 feet tall. They're much higher than waves in the Atlantic. Drake Passage also has underwater mountains that you can't see. The huge current squeezes through this narrow passage and causes waves to crash against these mountains underwater. These internal waves create whirls that bring cold water up from the deep ocean. So it's not just rough on the surface, the water is wild all the way down. The first sailor managed to sail around Cape Horn and through the Drake Passage in 1616. It was a Dutch navigator, Willem Schouten, in 1616. But the most famous attempt to cross it was undertaken by Sir Ernest Henry Shackleton on his ship named Endurance. He and 27 of his men set off from South Georgia, aiming to reach Vassal Bay in Antarctica. But things didn't go as planned. On January 19, 1915, their ship got stuck in the ice. And by October, it began to sink. They camped on floating ice for 2 months before sailing lifeboats to a remote, icy place called Elephant Island. Shackleton and 5 men made a risky journey to South Georgia to get help. It took them 15 days to cross Drake Passage with hurricane winds. Finally, they arrived safely and organized a rescue for the rest of their crew. Scientists found the shipwreck of Endurance only in 2022, 10,000 feet below the water. In December of 2019, 6 fearless athletes decided to cross the Drake Passage by rowing a boat for the first time in history. It took them 12 days of non-stop rowing with a 90-minute rotation of rowers. They managed to do it and it was probably the hardest possible way to cross the passage. The athletes mentioned it was cold, wet, and dirty, and the waves hit them like walls. The weather in the Drake Passage changes a lot, but ship captains can always see it coming and change their path. They will move the departure time to have a safety margin and not to get stuck in the middle of the passage in the worst possible conditions. Sometimes, the journey will be smooth and calm, and they call it Drake Lake. Other times, people on the ship will feel rough waves, which is called Drake Shake. Some experienced captains who often cross the passage say that the Drake Lake effect happens once in every 10 crossings, and they see the Drake Shake once or twice in every 10 journeys. A schooner or a kayak will probably not survive the journey among giant waves, but modest vessels and cruise ships have sturdy hulls and advanced stabilizing mechanisms. So, the journey isn't that dangerous anymore, but still, it's quite an adventure, especially if you're seasick. If you don't feel like risking it but want to travel from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean by water the fast way, the Panama Canal is waiting for you. People first started thinking about making a water path across Panama in the 16th century. Back then, a Spanish explorer found out that only a thin piece of land separated the two oceans. But it seemed impossible to build it because of the mountains and thick jungle, so the idea had to wait a couple of centuries. Finally, in 1880, France, led by the man who built the Suez Canal in Egypt, tried to make the canal. But the people who started the construction soon found out it was much harder than it looked on a map. The land in Panama was one of the toughest and most dangerous places to dig a big waterway. Workers had to literally move huge mountains in a jungle full of snakes, where it was really hot and rainy. During the wet season, heavy rain turned rivers into wild rapids and soaked the workers. Sometimes, they didn't see the sun for 2 weeks, and their clothes stayed wet all the time. Big rocks were falling, and tiny mosquitoes that carried malaria made people very sick. And then, an earthquake happened on top of everything. They were losing thousands of people. That's why France decided to abandon the project after 7 years. Then, the United States bought the French assets in the Canal Zone and finished it by 1914. It cost the US around $375 million. The 50-mile-long passage of water saves ships traveling between New York and San Francisco 7,872 miles. Around 14,000 ships use it every year and pay around $1.8 million in tolls. So it looks like it all paid off. Another challenging waterway in this part of the world is the Amazon River. It's around 4,300 miles long and flows through 3 countries with over 30 million people living in its basin. But there isn't a single bridge across it. The river has many marshes and soft soils, so engineers would need to build very long bridges and very deep foundations, which costs a lot of money. Building bridges over deep water is tough, but in other places in the world, engineers can use things like floating platforms to help. The river's path and water levels change a lot during the year. During the dry season from June to November, the river is usually 2 to 6 miles wide. But in the wet season from December to April, the river can become as wide as 30 miles. And the water level can rise by 50 feet. That's why they can't build floating bridges or pontoons. The riverbanks are made of soft dirt that moves and erodes with the seasons, and it makes things even harder. It would have to be an absolutely unique project to overcome all these challenges. Luckily, there's no pressing need for a bridge across the Amazon right now. The river mostly goes through areas that are sparsely populated, so there aren't so many major roads to be connected by bridges. Look at these 2 identical diamonds. You won't see the difference with the unaided eye, yet your credit card will surely notice it. On the left, it's a 0.9 carat diamond that will cost you somewhere around $5,000. And on the right, you can see a 1 carat diamond with the price starting at $8,000. The difference is only about 0.02 grams, but the price changes a lot. And both of them are tiny, just around 6 millimeters in diameter. Yeah, a carat is not that much. It's a unit of mass that equals 200 milligrams. As for the biggest diamond ever found, it's 3,106 carats and weighs over 600 grams. An average orange weighs about 140 grams, so this diamond is like 4 oranges. It's called the Cullinan diamond, and it was found in South Africa in 1905. It got its name after the name of the mine it was found in. You can't see its full version these days as it was cut into several pieces. In total, it was divided into 9 larger stones and a whole bunch of smaller ones. In early 1905, the cutting of the Cullinan diamond was entrusted to diamond expert Joseph Asher, the head of the Asher Diamond Company in Amsterdam. A team consisting of 3 specialists dedicated 8 months to the task of transforming the large diamond into smaller gemstones, beginning their work in February that year. Initially, the monumental stone was divided into 7 pieces, which were further cut to create 9 large stones, each named Cullinan with a corresponding Roman numeral from 1 to 9. During the first attempt at cutting the Cullinan diamond, Joseph Asher broke the cleaving knife, which had taken 4 days to prepare, without causing any damage to the diamond. A new cleaving knife was then used for the second blow, resulting in the diamond being split into 2 pieces. The discovery of the largest gem-quality rough diamond sparked speculation and a sense of mystery, with some suggesting that the Cullinan diamond was merely a fragment of a much larger diamond. There were claims that 4 magnificent pieces had been broken off from a larger stone. Despite much discussion and speculation about the origin of the Cullinan diamond, no concrete evidence emerged to support these theories. But is the Cullinan diamond really the biggest diamond ever found? Well, the answer is yes and no at the same time. The thing is, until faceted, the diamond isn't as magnificent as you might think. So yes, it is indeed the biggest one, but nobody really could handle a 600-gram faceted diamond. Such a giant couldn't really adorn anything. The Golden Jubilee diamond, weighing around 545 carats, which is about 109 grams, is known as the largest cut and faceted diamond globally, surpassing the Cullinan diamond by 15.37 carats, or 3.07 grams. It was discovered in 1985 at the Premier Mine in South Africa, which is also the birthplace of many famous diamonds, like the original Cullinan. The Golden Jubilee diamond was originally referred to as the Unnamed Brown. The cutting and polishing of the diamond presented challenges due to its size, surface, deep cracks, and inclusions. De Beers utilized new cutting technologies for the project, which were later applied during the cutting of the Centenary diamond. After extensive work to reduce the diamond's weight, it was completed in 1990 in a fire rose cushion shape. The diamond was then brought to Thailand for exhibition and later purchased by Thai business people in 1995. It was given to King Bhumibol as a gift for his 50th anniversary on the throne and named the Golden Jubilee. The Golden Jubilee diamond is currently showcased in the Royal Museum at Phimmamak Golden Temple Throne Hall in Bangkok as part of the crown jewels. One day, nearly 18 years ago, a Filipino fisherman discovered a 2-foot-long pearl inside a giant clam in the waters near Palawan Island, the Philippines. He decided to keep it as a good luck charm, hiding it under his bed. Unfortunately, his home burned down, but miraculously, the 75-pound pearl survived. Officials in the Philippines have confirmed that the pearl measures 26 inches in length and 12 inches in width and is valued at $100 million. This incredible discovery surpasses the current record holder for the largest known pearl, the Pearl of Lao Tzu, which is valued at $35 million and weighs less than 15 pounds. The Pearl of Lao Tzu was also found off the coast of Palawan in 1934 and is currently displayed at Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum in New York. The Bahia Emerald is known for being one of the largest emeralds ever discovered, with the largest single shard found within it. It weighs approximately 752 pounds and originates from Bahia, Brazil. The gemstone narrowly avoided flooding during Hurricane Katrina in 2005 while being stored in a warehouse in New Orleans. An ownership dispute arose after the emerald was reported stolen in September 2008 from a secured vault in South El Monte in Los Angeles County, California. However, the emerald was eventually located and the case was brought to a settlement. Although the gemstone has been estimated to be worth around $400 million, its true value is still uncertain. A couple of years ago, a Sri Lankan gem company reported the discovery of what they claimed to be the world's largest single natural blue sapphire, weighing 683 pounds. Let's see what jewelry you could make from this behemoth stone. A blue sapphire with such a gigantic weight could be turned into 1,549,016 1-carat stones adorning engagement rings. The owners intended to auction off this gemstone after it had been officially valued. The Gemological Institute in Ratnapura, which initially owned the gem, declined an offer of more than $1 million from a potential Middle Eastern buyer. They estimated that the gem's real value was around $100 million. The discovery of the El Dorado rough topaz in 1984 in Minas Gerais, Brazil, was a significant event, with the rough stone weighing an impressive 81 pounds. However, after being cut and polished, the finished gemstone ended up weighing only 13.6 pounds, resulting in a loss of 83% of the original weight. This drastic reduction in weight was primarily due to the removal of non-gem quality material from the rough stone in order to create a high-quality product with an excellent cut, color, and clarity. The final product was a stunning faceted topaz with a perfect emerald cut, good clarity, and a desirable yellowish-brown color. Weighing 31,000 carats, the finished stone became the largest faceted topaz and gemstone in the world. The name El Dorado has since been used metaphorically to describe a place where wealth can be quickly attained. Additionally, it's been associated with El Dorado County in California and various other towns and cities across the United States. The term has also come to symbolize something highly sought after, though it may be elusive or never found. A ruby weighing 55.22 carats was recently sold at auction for a record-breaking $34.8 million. Making it the largest and most expensive ruby to be sold this way. The gem was discovered in Mozambique and named Estrela de Fura, which means Star of Fura in Portuguese. Sotheby's, the auction house that handled the sale, described the ruby as extremely rare and significant in the world of gemstones. While diamonds typically dominate record gemstone sales, rubies are also highly prized for their rarity and value. The previous record for a ruby sold at auction was set by the Sunrise Ruby in 2015. It's a 25.59 carat stone from Myanmar that fetched $30.3 million. Estrela de Fura was originally a 101 carat rough stone, making it the largest gem-quality ruby ever found. It was carefully cut and polished to enhance its color and brilliance before being put up for auction.
There's a ship drifting somewhere in the ocean without a crew. The last time someone saw it was over 50 years ago. Its story reminds of that of the Flying Dutchman, a ship that's bound to sail forever and bring disaster to whoever sees it at sea. At least the legend says so. Unlike the Flying Dutchman, the SS Bay Chimo was definitely real and built for a German company in Hamburg and began as an ordinary cargo ship. It was trading supplies between Hamburg and Sweden in the Baltic Sea starting from 1914. It had a strong steam engine and a hull made of steel. A few years later, it became British property. Then, in the 1920s, a Canadian company purchased it for around $18,000, a huge amount of money back then. The new owner, the Hudson's Bay Company, was actively using the ship for several years. They would often send it on voyages from its home port in Scotland to Siberia, Alaska, the Yukon, and the Northwest Territories. It also passed through the Panama Canal and even the Suez Canal, with fur pelts for sale on board. Sometimes it would also transport passengers. It had completed 9 successful voyages before this strip of good luck came to an end. Starting from the 1930s, SS Bay Chimo would have trouble with ice and storms. When it first got trapped in ice in October of 1931, some of the crew managed to escape to Alaska. 15 of 22 sailors decided to stay with their vessel and try to save it. They had furs and other valuable cargo worth around $58,000 aboard. The company sent them supplies to survive the winter. They set camp near the ship out of the hatches, tarpaulins, and other materials, and offloaded the cargo. At the end of November, a blizzard rushed through the area, and it seemed like it had taken the ship with it. The ice platform had survived, but the ship broke free. Some of the crew members were sure it had sunk. But soon after, they heard from one of the locals who had spotted their ship around 45 miles away from their camp. The crew moved on with their lives, and the ship started its journey as a runaway vessel. People would spot SS Bechimo once a year or so, all the way until 1965. It was mostly spotted off the coast of Alaska. A man going to Nome with his sled dog, along with prospectors, explorers, and treasure hunters, all claimed to have seen SS Bechimo. Someone tried to board it and take it to port, but ended up stranded on it for days because of horrible weather. Others got luckier and managed to take a whaleboat, some furniture, and other valuables from the vessel. Those who got close to the ship saw that it was damaged and missing the propeller. Still, it stayed afloat without a crew for at least 38 years and became the longest sailing ghost ship in history. In 2006, the Alaskan authorities started a project to solve the mystery of this ghost ship of the Arctic and finally find SS Bechimo, either still above or below the water. So far, the project has not been a success. SS Bechimo remains one of the estimated 4,000 ships that have disappeared off Alaskan shores. If the legend of the 17th century isn't lying, this ghost ship could be sailing somewhere along the Flying Dutchman. It belonged to the Dutch East India Company. Its captain managed to do the impossible for that time and sailed from Holland to Indonesia in only 3 months. They said he was flying over the sea, and some evil tongues explained that he had made a deal with evil forces to achieve that. Once the ship was sailing back home, its captain and crew disappeared without a trace. There are many versions of what happened to it. One of the first ones said it had tried to enter port at the Cape of Good Hope, got in a terrible storm, and sank as there was no captain to save it. Another legend says the captain had refused to obey the skies to let the ship sink during the storm. A scary life form then struck the boat and the crew, and it was condemned to forever wander without rest. Many sailors claim to have spotted the wandering Dutchman. The Duke of York, who was to become King of England, mentioned having seen it in Australian waters. Right after spotting the ship, the man who saw it first fell from the top of the mast and didn't survive. There were more encounters with this legendary ship up to the middle of the 20th century. Ships would nearly collide with it as the Flying Dutchman jumped out of the blue. Scientists have a more logical explanation for this mystery: Fata Morgana, not to be confused with Hakuna Matata. Now, when you're out at sea on a hot day and the air is all wavy, it feels like when you look at the road on a scorching summer day. That's because of something called atmospheric refraction. When light passes through different layers of air with different temperatures and densities, it bends and twists. Sometimes, under certain conditions, this bending of light can create really bizarre optical illusions over the ocean, like sightings of the Flying Dutchman. The Fata Morgana phenomenon can make distant objects appear distorted, stretched, or even lifted above the horizon. So you can see a ship far away, but because of the way the light is bending, it will look like it's floating above the water or even disappearing and reappearing. A Fata Morgana is most commonly seen in polar regions, especially over large sheets of ice that have a uniform low temperature. But you can see it anywhere, even in deserts and over lakes on hot days. The first stories about ghost ships go all the way back to ancient Greek and Roman mythology. One of the most famous ghost ships in history is the Mary Celeste. This brigantine was traveling from New York City to Genoa and was fully stocked with provisions, but missing a crew when it was discovered in the Atlantic Ocean in 1872. The crew's personal belongings were also there, completely undisturbed. The final entry in their log was made 10 days earlier. We still don't know what happened to its crew, and the ship has inspired many spooky stories and legends. The Lady Lovibond was another legendary schooner that is believed to have been wrecked off the coast of Kent in the middle of the 18th century. The story tells that the ship's captain, Simon Reed, had just got married and took his bride on board for a celebratory cruise, despite the superstition that it could bring bad luck. They were on their way to Portugal when the first mate, who is also in love with the captain's new wife, went mad because of jealousy, attacked another crew member, and then took over the wheel and steered the ship straight into the dreaded Goodwin Sands. No one aboard survived, and the schooner is said to reappear as a ghost vessel every 50 years. In present times, many vessels become abandoned and turned into ghost ships intentionally. There are thousands of them floating in U.S. rivers, lakes, channels, and coastal waters. Some people lose their boats in storms and other extreme weather. Others have to abandon their boats because maintaining them can cost 10% of the boat's price. Plus, docking a vessel can add up to several $1,000s every year. Most boats have been made of fiberglass, so an owner can't just recycle them as scrap metal. So, once they want to get rid of it, they often tie it to a dock and sneak away, or leave it floating far away from the shore, or just try to sink it. When ghost ships sink in shallow waters, they can cause damage to coral reefs, mangroves, marshlands, oyster habitats, and wetlands. Plus, they can collide with unsuspecting regular ships and cause real trouble. So, don't do that. Enough said. Do you remember 2011? Well, play along with me. A diver is set to go deep into the waters of the Musi River, located in the heart of an Indonesian island. He is one among many who have been getting unbelievable artifacts from the bottom of the river. Little by little, divers and fishers discover a long-lost Sumatran civilization. Known as the Island of Gold, the kingdom of Srivijaya was most likely the closest to a real-life El Dorado there has ever been. However, it disappeared late in the 13th century, and until recently, researchers didn't even know the exact location of the kingdom. Picture a civilization built on a river, a true water world. According to the archaeologists that have been studying Srivijaya, houses, markets, and places of worship were built on wooden piles above the level of the water. Citizens moved around like modern-day Venetians in simple boats. Srivijaya was known to be a rich and important kingdom. It existed from the 7th to the 11th century CE. It was part of the Silk Road, and anyone traveling from east to west had to pass through the city. Their kings were smart and gained control of the Malacca Strait, which allowed the town to have total control over trading routes in the region. If anything, they sure were honoring the town's name. Srivijaya translates from Sanskrit into prosperous victor, or simply glorious. The kingdom was an important commercial outpost of ancient times. It was strategically located among the most influential commercial routes of the ancient world, which means its citizens became extremely rich. Ancient wealthy societies used to overly display their gold and precious metals. They would often use these metals as offerings to their deities, or they would use them to forge large statues and to make jewelry for kings and queens and decorations for their palaces. Srivijaya wasn't different. Local Indonesian divers who have been exploring the half-mile of the Musi River near the city of Palembang have found some evidence. So far, they've discovered a life-size statue of Buddha, jewelry studded with precious gems, temple bells, mirrors, golden jugs, and other items. No official archaeological excavations have been done in the area, so these artifacts are the first items of the Srivijayan Empire ever found. Sean Kinsley, a British maritime archaeologist who has reported on these discoveries, says he is truly surprised. For long, people have been speculating about the true wealth of Srivijaya, and it seems that the rumors have been confirmed. We're starting from ground zero, he says. We don't know what clothes the people of Srivijaya wore, what their tastes were, what kinds of ceramics they like to eat off. Even though this discovery has brought excitement to the scientific community, there is a downside. Divers and fishers sell the retrieved artifacts at the International Antiquities Market before archaeologists can take a look at them. Researchers could try to buy some items, but they're sold for millions of dollars worldwide. Most of the information we know about this El Dorado of the East was learned from merchant accounts of the city. These descriptions say Srivijaya was a kingdom of human-eating snakes and multilingual parrots. That's weird. Some say its active volcanoes gave the town an eerie and enigmatic sign, and all stories emphasize the amount of gold available there. Travel reports were a common way to describe cities in ancient times. In case you didn't know, this is how the legend of El Dorado originally began. As European explorers began their excavations in South American lands back in the 1500s, the word got out that an Amazonian civilization used to paint their leader in gold as an offering to higher powers. The legend of El Hombre Dorado, also known as the Golden Man, began to quickly spread around Europe. It turned out that it was only a ceremonial piece of pre-Columbian civilization. It had nothing to do with the land of infinite gold. Now, no one knows what brought about the decline of the Srivijaya Empire. Some speculate that its active volcanoes could have swallowed it, or maybe wooden houses built above the river eventually sank. Maybe if divers keep retrieving lost items from the bottom of the river, archaeologists will be able to figure out what happened to the city. It seems to be quite common in the history of the world. Some ancient civilizations disappeared without a trace, as happened with the Mayan civilization, for example. The Mayans managed to build one of the biggest empires in pre-Columbian America. It was believed to be home to over 2 million people, and it thrived for over 6 centuries. Its sudden demise is something that bothers archaeologists and scientists alike. The Mayans began to settle in South America as early as 1500 BCE. Their civilization spanned Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, Guatemala, and Belize. They are believed to have built around 40 cities at the height of their empire. They also developed a complex hieroglyph system that has been studied since it was discovered by modern scientists. The Mayans were keen engineers, astronomers, and farmers. They were post-nomadic people that settled in vast areas of farmland where they could grow corn and other types of vegetables. Archaeologists are still learning a lot about the Mayan civilization by examining their ruins. The city of Chichen Itza, located in the Yucatan Peninsula, is one of the most important Mayan sites unearthed today. The site is made up of a total of 26 ruins, and it is home to a world-famous pyramid known as El Castillo. It consists of a series of square terraces with stairways on each of the 4 sides of the temple. It was built as an homage to a feathered serpent deity. The Mayans were such architectural geniuses that they managed to build a pyramid that cast a particular shadow. More specifically, in the late afternoon during the spring and fall equinoxes, the pyramid casts several triangular shadows that create the illusion of a feathered serpent crawling down the pyramid. And they created this with none of the tech we have today. The city is so amazing that since 2007, it has been considered one of the 7 wonders of the New World. The Mayan Empire thrived for over 6 centuries due to their wise resource management system and astronomical knowledge. They were able to accurately predict eclipses, and using their rudimentary technology, could even locate Venus and Mars. They had everything to thrive for much longer than they actually did. This is why the Mayans' fall intrigues modern scientists so much. No one has been able to understand completely what led to their demise. That is, until a recent discovery. A study done by NASA claims it can explain what might have happened. Scientists have uncovered a sample of pollen trapped for over 1,200 years in ancient layers of lake sediment, which dates back to the time just before the collapse of the civilization. The analysis has revealed something completely new about the Mayans. Instead of the suspected claims that the Mayans disappeared due to terrible disease or some extended conflict in the region, it could have happened due to deforestation. Perhaps to build their entire empire, they had to cut a lot of trees. Without trees, their soil could have eroded, and all their fertile lands could have slowly and gradually become barren. According to NASA scientists, the temperatures in the region could have risen by about 6 degrees, and from that point on, the land would have become even drier and crops more difficult to grow. Basically, NASA says that the Mayans couldn't do the sole thing that made them thrive, which was agriculture, and their kingdom began to decline. Oh yeah, and this theory was supported by yet another find. Archaeologists found skeletons from the time of the empire. Those had prominent signs of malnutrition. This theory might really shed new light on Mayan history. It could explain what brought down such a powerful civilization. So, what do you say? Which theory is true? Have we actually managed to find out the reason for the fall of the Mayan Empire?
Strange things occur in the cold waters of Antarctica. One of these things happened to a ship called Jenny. It was a small schooner whose history began in 1822. The boat and its crew set sail and disappeared a year later. For 18 years, the ship was considered sunk. People forgot about it, but in 1840, the vessel reminded the world of itself. That year, the whaling ship Hope sailed through the Drake Channel in Antarctica. The crew members noticed a ship among icebergs. It was the schooner Jenny. It was floating slowly in the dark, with no signs of life. The captain of the Hope, Mr. Brighton, gave the order to approach the mysterious vessel. They thought it was some creepy ghost ship, but as they came closer, they noticed crew members on the deck. The sailors of the Hope called out to them, but received no answer. This time, it became clear that something terrible had happened to the Jenny. When Brighton boarded, he realized that the Jenny crew members weren't missing. They were here. Frozen people stood like statues. Brighton went down to the lower deck and found the captain. He was sitting frozen at the table, holding a pen. Brighton looked at the logbook. The last record was made on May 4th, 1823. The captain wrote that he was the only living member of the crew. They spent 71 days without food. It seemed that the ship got lost in the sea because its captain went off course or sailed into an iceberg, but no one knew for sure. After that, nobody ever saw the Jenny again. According to rumors, the crew of the Hope abandoned the frozen ship and left it to drift in the cold waters. According to other rumors, this whole story is fiction. The story of the Jenny was described in a German magazine in the middle of the 19th century. Still, there was no further evidence of the ship's existence. Already in our time, Cambridge University decided to explore the case of the Jenny. The researchers discovered that one of the crew members of the Hope, who didn't disclose his name, told someone the legend of the frozen ship. Someone shared the story with another guy, and it was published in a German magazine called Globus. And that's all. There was no other evidence. One of the most famous ghost ships was the Mary Celeste, and there's no doubt about its existence. The history of this vessel was documented in court. People wrote about it in newspapers, but the most exciting thing is that the ship continued to be used even after 10 people disappeared from its deck. The history of the Mary Celeste began in Canada in 1861. When it was first built, the ship was called the Amazon. It changed captains several times, and it also hit some rocks. The boat was sold, bought, then sold again, repaired, and sailed under the name Mary Celeste. In 1872, it had a new captain, Benjamin Briggs. He was a decent, brave man with a lot of experience in navigation. He had a beloved wife, a daughter, and a son. When he went on his last voyage, he took his wife and daughter with him, and his son stayed in America. In November of 1872, the Mary Celeste sailed from the port in New York with 10 people on board and disappeared. 8 days later, another ship, the Dei Gratia, also left New York and followed the same route. Dei Gratia's captain, David Morehouse, noticed the Mary Celeste and immediately realized something was wrong. The ship was moving too freely, as if no one was controlling it. The captain tried to contact the crew members, but no one answered him. Then, together with other sailors, he climbed aboard the Mary Celeste. The ship was in good condition. There was no damage. The hold was slightly filled with water, but it could be easily pumped out. Everything seemed fine, but one lifeboat was missing. The crew members' valuables were in their cabins. The cargo was in the hold. The supplies of water and food were untouched. Judging by the records in the logbook, The ship was caught in a storm, but it was not too strong. Other ships also sailed through this storm, but nothing bad happened to them. The last record was dated November 25th, and it claimed that everything was fine. The sails of the Mary Celeste were slightly damaged, but perhaps it happened after the crew had disappeared. The whole ship was in excellent condition, but what made the people leave it? Part of the crew of the Dei Gratia stayed on board the Mary Celeste to bring it to dry land. Everything went well. They delivered the ship to the closest port. Next, the captain of the Dei Gratia appeared before the court and told about what had happened. However, the prosecutor and the judge didn't want to believe in the story of the Mary Celeste. They were sure the captain got rid of the ship's crew to get money for its cargo. According to the maritime laws of that time, if you found a ghost ship with valuable cargo, then a substantial part of this cargo belonged to you. So, many people thought that David Morehouse decided to earn some money. This version seemed to be more valid than the one about the mysterious disappearance of 10 people. Fortunately, no one accused the captain of committing a crime. They thanked him for his service and gave him a monetary reward. However, his reputation was damaged, which greatly affected his career, as many believed he attacked the crew of the Mary Celeste. But even after this terrible case, trial, and investigation, the story was not over. The Mary Celeste was still an expensive and efficient vessel. It sailed several times, but then one captain crashed it into the reefs to get insurance. The court revealed this deception and accused the captain of intentional property damage. The story of the Mary Celeste became famous all over the world. People began to build their theories, realistic and not. Someone believed the ship had sailed through the Bermuda Triangle, but this version was quickly refuted, as the route of the Mary Celeste passed thousands of miles away from the Bermuda region. Did the Kraken or another giant monster attack the ship? Nope. Since the boat was found in almost perfect condition, there were no signs of a struggle. One of the most popular versions was that the crew of the Mary Celeste stole some valuable cargo and sailed to Spain on the rescue boat. However, those who knew Captain Benjamin Briggs said he was a good, honest man. Besides, he had a son in New York, and Briggs would never leave him. A more thorough investigation revealed that a series of accidental circumstances could have caused the disappearance of the ship's crew. Before its last voyage, the vessel delivered coal. Perhaps the pump intended for pumping water got clogged with coal after that, and when the ship got into a storm, the hold filled with water and the pump broke. The captain couldn't understand the amount of water because numerous barrels in the cargo hold blocked the view. Benjamin Briggs assumed it was dangerous to stay on the ship during a storm, so he evacuated with the passengers on a lifeboat. Perhaps they were close to land and decided to sail there, but the storm intensified and overturned the boat. Also, one record in the log journal said that the chronometer was faulty. It was a device that helped to determine your location at sea using longitude. Briggs got lost and didn't know which way to sail. The storm was strong, and he couldn't determine whether the ship would sink. Perhaps Briggs decided to leave the ship in a rescue boat when he saw the coast of the Azores. The uniqueness of this ghost ship case is that, unlike many others, you can investigate it yourself. There's a lot of information about the Mary Celeste on the internet. There are documentaries and research articles. Perhaps you'll be able to notice something that others haven't seen and solve the mystery of the disappearance of 10 people.
Unlike many other ancient Egyptian burial grounds, King Tutankhamun's tomb stayed hidden and free of unwanted thieves for 3,000 years. One reason was that the tomb was smaller than average and tucked away in a place called the Valley of the Kings. This area was already being extensively explored by the time they stumbled upon Tut's spot. The entrance was all covered in debris from building a nearby tomb, which must have also helped keep it a secret. There were also 0 writings or signs on the outside of the tomb. Time passing also played a part in keeping it in amazing shape until the 1920s, when a man named Howard Carter finally made it in. But was Carter that big of a hero? Some recent findings say he might have been sneakier than initially thought. People used to think Carter wasn't just a glorified treasure hunter, he was a true archaeologist. Before Tut, he had been on a relentless quest for Egyptian artifacts. He discovered his interest in these unusual objects when he was a child, and soon started drawing the sculptures and inscriptions that were found in ancient tombs. After stumbling upon the remains of King Tut, Carter spent a decade recording and processing all sorts of objects, like golden thrones, chariots, and statues from Tut's tomb, shipping them down the Nile to Egypt's museum in Cairo. Well, at least that was the official story. More recent discoveries claim that not all of the objects made it to Egyptian officials. A secret letter seems to uncover Carter's little 10 for them, 1 for me policy. The letter in question was sent to Sir Alan Gardiner, a philologist and friend of Carter's, dated from 1922. In these writings, Carter mentioned having found the tomb and was asking his buddy for some advice. In another letter from 1934, Gardiner seems to be thanking Carter for an amulet, which was sent to him as a thank you gift. Carter was adamant that it didn't come from Tut's tomb, but evidently it did. Even the British director of the Egyptian Museum was onto Carter's sneaky endeavors, but couldn't prove it. He compared Gardiner's amulet to others from Tut's tomb, and lo and behold, they were a perfect match. Gardiner was so disappointed to have been put in such a sticky situation that he vented to Carter in another letter. Deciding to be a good friend, Gardiner didn't throw the famous archaeologist under the bus. Instead, he advised Carter to take those stolen goods back to Cairo, just like he'd advise you to like this video and subscribe to the Brightside channel for more amazing videos on the most unique topics in history. It's not the only shady piece of information on Carter's post-discovery behavior. In 1947, a man named Alfred Lucas, who used to work with a controversial archaeologist, gave some information in an obscure journal in Cairo. He claimed that Carter sneakily cracked open the burial chamber door himself. Then he sealed it back up like nothing had happened before the official uncovering. Now, why would he do that? Well, the same theory suggests that Carter and his crew might have entered the tomb early so they could get their hands on some ancient goodies. Obviously, these people couldn't risk having such objects sold while they were still alive, but made sure they were auctioned off after they passed. Carter, though, never confessed to anything. He made no official denial either, but the Egyptian government couldn't risk any more mysterious disappearances, so they prohibited him from entering the tomb for a while. Some have connected this apparent stealing to the curse of King Tut. If you've never heard of it, know that it became quite the scary tale soon after King Tutankhamun's resting place was uncovered. It claimed that anyone messing with the tomb of the boy pharaoh would face some serious bad luck. It's not all dramatic like a mummy going on an aggressive spree, but word got out that the people involved in disturbing King Tut's lair met some mysterious, untimely ends. The main untimely passing related to this supposed curse is that of George Herbert, the 5th Earl of Carnarvon. He was this British aristocrat who helped fund the search for the tomb. He passed away just a year after the tomb was opened. Now, people love to call it mysterious, but it turns out that Herbert was already in pretty bad shape health-wise when he got to Cairo, and he ended up getting taken down by a regular disease. Now, let's talk numbers. There were a lot of people linked to this tomb opening – security guards, archaeologists, and supporting staff. And sure, a few of them did pass not long after the tomb started receiving visitors. As much as we'd like this curse to be true for the sake of, good storytelling, statistically, if you have a bunch of people connected to opening a tomb, you'd expect some passings just by random chance. The average lifespan for those supposedly targeted by the ancient curse was more than 20 years after the spell was supposed to kick in. Herbert's daughter even lived until the 1980s, that's half a century later. And Howard Carter himself lived until 1935, a solid 16 years after the big reveal. Some have suggested that the whole curse was nothing more than a careful PR strategy. You see, when Tut's tomb was found, Howard Carter wanted to make a priority out of keeping nosy reporters away. So he might have come up with a curse hanging over anyone entering the boy king's resting place. But what was stolen from King Tut's tomb anyway? Well, some jewelry to begin with. It might have been snatched by Howard Carter himself, according to a French specialist. He did some intensive research by looking at old pictures taken from inside the tomb back in the 1920s. He compared those images to various objects from museums and auction houses. He soon started to piece together the whereabouts of some of Tut's jewelry. First up, there's this collar that used to be on Tut's chest. It was all broken into pieces, and some parts went via Carter to the Nelson Atkins Museum in Missouri. Meanwhile, other bits ended up on a necklace owned by some unnamed people who tried to sell it in 2015 but failed. Even the Nelson Atkins Museum agrees, as they've confirmed the information on their website. Then there's a headdress piece. Some beads from it that once belonged to Tut apparently got stolen by Carter too. They were also strung into a necklace and are now being held at the St. Louis Art Museum. Another fancy collar made out of glazed ceramic magic spent some time at the Met, far away in New York. Thankfully, it was sent back to Egypt a bit over a decade ago. This seems to have been, as you'd expect by now, also stolen by Carter. Missing artifacts aside, King Tut still gave a ton of amazing objects that helped us learn more about this incredible ancient culture. Starting with the famous burial mask. It's this massive 21-inch gold art piece with semi-precious stones and glass paste. It weighs 22 pounds and showcases the boy pharaoh with a long beard and a headdress with a cobra and vulture. On the back, there's this spell from an important ancient Egyptian spiritual book that's supposed to make sure it works just as well in the afterlife. Tut was also apparently a board game enthusiast. They found 4 board games in his tomb, some made of ivory. Archaeologists also found a pair of gold sandals, though you'd imagine they were more for show than for comfort. In fact, the pharaoh probably never wore them in his lifetime. Now, speaking of fashion items, it turns out Tut was quite the fancy ruler. They even found a mannequin in his tomb that was used to pick out, adjust, and store his outfits and jewelry. The boy king seemed to have also enjoyed some music, based on the 2 trumpets historians found in his tomb. Though they were played back in 1935 in a BBC broadcast, the instruments are today considered too fragile to be maneuvered. Under the burning sun, among the sand dunes, somewhere in the Sahara Desert, you're walking in search of an ancient treasure. Finally, you find a strange rock in the sand. It's big, looks like a large piece of black coal or rock, but something shiny on its surface makes the rock unusual. This unique find is the oldest thing that has ever been discovered on our planet. This rock was born long before Earth appeared in outer space. The unusual meteorite was found in 2020 in a remote area of the Sahara Desert. Scientists have analyzed the isotopes of magnesium and aluminum on the stone's surface and found that its age is about 4.5 billion years. At the moment, this is the oldest sample of magma from space in history. It belongs to a small protoplanet that didn't have time to form completely. It happened a very long time ago when our solar system was forming. Many huge asteroids were floating in space. Some of them were formed into huge celestial bodies, which later became planets. The big rocky planets were absorbing the smaller ones. The rock was part of a little protoplanet that just began its formation, but another huge asteroid destroyed it. The planet shattered into billions of pieces. Some of them became part of other planets. Some flew outside the solar system, and one piece that had been wandering in space until our Earth was formed. After that, it hit the planet's atmosphere and fell into the territory now known as the Sahara Desert. The rock was discovered in 2020, but the erosion of extraterrestrial rocks shows that it could have fallen much earlier. This ancient thing weighing around 70 pounds has several pieces of different meteorites inside. In simple words, it's a volcanic rock consisting of lava. It has cooled, solidified, and crystallized. That's why you notice the glitter. Scientists hope that further study of the rock will help to learn more about our solar system foundation. The biggest asteroid discovered in the U.S. is the Willamette. Its size is 84 square feet, and its weight is more than 15 tons. This is half the weight of a bus. Several people can fit on the surface of this outer space object. But the coolest thing is that it's not a rock like most meteorites that were found. Willamette is made of nickel and iron. This massive piece of metal was discovered in 1906. Now, the huge rock is kept at the American Museum of Natural History. The largest meteorite ever found is Hoba. It's located in Namibia, and people have never changed its position because it's too heavy. The weight of Hoba is 60 tons. It's heavier than a tank. The next space-related event occurred on February 28 in southwest England. On this day, a huge flash lit up the sky. Then there was a loud crash. Several residents opened the doors of their houses and noticed a black sooty spot on the lawn. They immediately guessed what had happened and reported the discovery to the British Meteorite Observation Network. If you ever find a meteorite, report it to some geological research or space center as soon as possible. The longer a space rock lies on the ground, the faster it loses its value. Rain, dust, snow, wind, scorching sun, all these factors damage the surface of the meteorite. It makes it difficult to study the celestial object. The meteorite found in England looks like coal, but it's way softer and more fragile. It most likely used to contain frozen water. The rock is part of a huge asteroid that plowed through outer space when our solar system hadn't fully formed yet. They found a unique combination of minerals inside the rock. It can help scientists learn more about the origins of the solar system and life on Earth. Now we're heading to Germany, to the small town of Nördlingen. A huge ancient meteorite's hidden here. It's very difficult to notice it unless you know the secret of this town. You're walking along the cozy little streets and looking at the buildings with beautiful architecture. You spend the whole day there and don't find anything that reminds you of a meteorite. To solve the mystery, you need to get out of town. So you climb a high hill and see that the city is located inside a pit. For a long time, locals were sure the house was located in the crater of an extinct volcano. If you look at the houses from a certain angle, you may notice an unusual shining coming from them. In the middle of the 20th century, a group of geologists came here and immediately declared that the crater doesn't look like a volcanic one. The town was built on a huge crater left by a meteorite. The huge celestial body fell here about 15 million years ago. It was so hot that the carbon bubbles inside instantly turned into small diamonds. When people were building this city, they didn't know they were using expensive stones, since the diamonds were hardly visible. The locals never attached importance to the fact that the city walls shine unusually in the sun. Now they believe this place was built from diamonds that had fallen from the sky. Our next stop is in the UK again. This time the rocks are of an earthly origin. The famous Stonehenge. People place circles of rocks here in a certain order. Everyone knows about this archaeological monument, but no one knows the reason for its creation for certain. Another construction built out of mysterious rocks was discovered just 2 miles away. It's called Superhenge. It's bigger, heavier, and takes up more space. Each plate here is 15 feet, which is about the height of 2 floors. Once, the stone stood vertically and formed a huge semicircle. But someone pushed the stones over about 4,500 years ago. It was a college prank. No, not really. That's why they couldn't be detected for a long time. Scientists still can't solve the mystery of Superhenge, but they believe the standing vertical stones were part of some huge monument. Some other amazing rocks are located in the south of Costa Rica. There are big ones, the size of a human, and there are smaller ones, the size of bowling balls. And they all have a perfectly round shape. These giant rocky spheres were created by people. It must have taken years of polishing using stone tools to get the perfect round shape. These balls are incredibly heavy, but can easily roll like a basketball. All the rocks are of a different age. Some of them were created about 2,500 years ago. Most of them are made of molten volcanic magma. Until now, scientists don't know for what purpose these stones were used. They were found in different parts of Costa Rica, near big cities. It's possible that ancient civilizations installed them specifically to show the greatness of local kings. Also, many experts believe the rocks were used as a tool for studying astronomy. The people who knew their purpose of the rocks had disappeared, and the history of the stones was lost along with them. Let's finish our journey with the coolest archaeological find. You're walking through the desert of Peru and climbing a low hill. You look down and notice the surface of the hill is covered with strange lines. You walk far away and see a huge cat on the hill. Such a drawing is called a geoglyph. Its length is around 120 feet, which is about half the size of a Boeing commercial jet. Archaeologists discovered the giant cat in 2020 and found out that it had been created somewhere between 200 and 100 BCE. This huge drawing is part of a mysterious group of different pictures. In addition to the cat, there are other animals, plants, and fantastic figures. All of them were found in the desert of Peru. The kitten was found by chance. Archaeologists didn't see it at first because natural erosion on the hillside had almost erased the silhouette.
They say nothing is ever lost, and it's true. Let's discover ships frozen in time. The first one is truly fascinating. Here, the Antikythera shipwreck. It's a Greek trading ship from the 1st century BCE. It's located on the east side of the Greek island of Antikythera and at the merging point of the Aegean and Mediterranean seas. Around 2,000 years later, in 1900, a group of Greek sponge divers discovered the wreck. They were going to Tunisia, yet they were forced to find shelter from a storm on a nearby island. Since they couldn't go anywhere due to the storm, they decided to look for sponges until the weather got calmer. One of the divers discovered the shipwreck at depths of around 130 feet. Imagine someone going for a sponge hunt, but getting out to the surface with archaeological treasures. The captain of the sponge boat talked to the Greek officials about what they had found. The officials sent 2 ships to the wreckage. The salvage operation was successful, and discoveries are now in Greece's National Archaeological Museum in Athens. The findings included 3 life-sized marble horses, jewelry, coins, and hundreds of works of art, including a 7-foot-tall colossus statue of Hercules. Among these treasures, Antikythera ephebe, a bronze statue of a young man, caught more attention. Because the ephebe doesn't comply with any familiar iconographic model, and there are no known copies of his type, he held a spherical object in his hand. Scholars have different theories of who that person could be, but they are not in a consensus yet. More than 70 years later, Jacques-Yves Cousteau and his team went to the area and recovered hundreds more artifacts and the remains of 4 people. Interestingly, they discovered a complex set of interlocking gears, capable of predicting the movement of the sun, moon, and several planets. The mechanism can also show the times of solar and lunar eclipses years into the future. Think of this Antikythera mechanism as an early computer calendar, to plan significant events like agricultural activities, religious rituals, and Olympic Games. These artifacts found in the Antikythera wreckage are some of the most important findings in modern archaeology. Just the Antikythera mechanism itself has changed our perception of the limits of ancient technology. The mechanism has a sophisticated design and was made over 1,000 years ago. After all these amazing discoveries, experts believe that the wreckage site has remained largely unexplored, and is mostly because of its location and the landscape of the seafloor on which the ship rests. The wreck is too deep for scuba divers but too shallow to use something like a submersible. A survey made on the seafloor in 2012 showed evidence of a second wreck about 800 feet to the south. It's clear that this area has a lot to offer humanity. What would happen if those sponge hunters didn't go to the area? Scientists found a shipwreck in Antarctica at the bottom of the Weddell Sea 107 years after it sank. The name of the ship was Endurance, and it was the lost vessel of Antarctic explorer Sir Ernest Shackleton. Scientists who laid eyes on it decades later say it is among the greatest undiscovered shipwrecks ever. That is why they filmed the whole discovery. The video shows the remains of the Endurance and proves it is still in remarkable condition. It has been sitting in 10,000 feet of water for over a century, yet it looks like it sank very recently. So the story goes like this. The ship was crushed by ice and sank in 1915. Shackleton and his crewmates had to escape by themselves in small lifeboats. From then on, it was all about survival. Shackleton imagined to get his crew to safety, then the ship sank. Yes, this is a pretty impressive story, but why did scientists prize this ship? Firstly, Shackleton's Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition sailed to make the first land crossing of Antarctica. Yes, the crew was trapped in ice, but the intention was important. Secondly, it's about the challenge itself of finding the shipwreck. The Weddell Sea is almost always covered in thick sea ice. You know, the same ice that made the Endurance sink. Getting near the presumed sinking location is super hard, let alone being able to conduct research. Experts of the modern expedition team foresaw the time when the lowest extent of Antarctic sea ice would come using satellite images. They realized that the weather was in their favor to start an expedition. Dr. John Shears said that they have successfully completed the world's most difficult shipwreck search, fighting against constantly shifting sea ice, blizzards, and temperatures decreasing to -0.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeesh, I can't imagine the worst conditions in Antarctica if these conditions are in their favor. Lastly, look at this. It's timbers. They're very much intact. Plus, you can read the ship's name. It's still visible. Marine archaeologist Menson Bound says that this is the finest wooden shipwreck he has ever discovered. He has 50 years of career experience, so I believe the guy. So how come the wood is not rotten? Dr. Michelle Taylor, a deep-sea polar biologist, said that there has been little wood deterioration because the wood-munching animals are not in this forest-free region of Antarctica. Workers of a coal mine in East Serbia discovered 3 shipwrecks that had been there for at least 1,300 years. The largest shipwreck is an ancient Roman fleet. It's around 50 feet long with a flat bottom. It's estimated that the ship could carry a crew of 30 to 35 people. Looking at its hull, you can see the marks of repairs. Wow, this one had a lengthy career. You know, it gives us insight into more than 1,000 years ago. The 2 smaller vessels, on the other hand, match descriptions of boats used by Slavic groups to attack the Roman frontier. These 2 have been discovered under mud and clay in an ancient riverbed. Apparently, in those times, there was a Roman base in a place called Viminacium City. Interestingly, Viminacium was a provincial capital with an estimated 40,000 inhabitants in the 4th century CE. For comparison, it was even larger than Pompeii. The Kostelach coal mine is a center of hidden gems. Archaeologists had found evidence of ancient human and animal activity here before. For instance, in 2012, experts found bones of at least 5 woolly mammoths, which went extinct about 10,000 years ago. Canadian archaeologists found a ship 150 years after it went missing in the Canadian Arctic waters. This merchant ship is called HMS Investigator. It was purchased in 1848 to search for the explorer Sir John Franklin's ship that got lost in the Northwest Passage expedition. So, HMS Investigator left Britain in 1850 for this rescue operation. The expedition crew, captained by Robert McClure, sailed the Investigator into the water. He realized that he was in the final leg of the Northwest Passage, the sea route across North America. But before he could sail into the Beaufort Sea, the 122-ton ship itself got stuck in the thick ice. The crew spent the winter over the Prince of Wales Strait. The following summer, McClure tried again to sail to the end of the passage, but the ice blocked his way once more. Here, too, the crew was forced to leave the ship. He steered the crew into the Bay of Mercy. There, they were to remain until 1853 when the crew of the HMS Resolute rescued them. Imagine a crew of 60 people who had to spend 3 winters in the Arctic without even knowing if they would survive. Later on, the ship was found sitting upright in about 36 feet of water. It was in very good condition. Arctic water has prevented the outer deck of the vessel from deteriorating quickly. The outline of the ship and its timber can be clearly seen. Plus, archaeologists have uncovered artifacts on land left by the sailors. They had unloaded everything before abandoning the Investigator. 3 sailor graves and 1 British naval shipwreck had also been discovered in the area. I wonder what else they could find there.
Wow, it's the only place where 1 minute you're learning 17 natural ways how to get rid of houseflies, and the next, you're taking an epic journey straight into a black hole. More than 10 billion with a B views in total. That's 47 billion minutes watched, or more than 70,000 years. That's all the way back to the Ice Age. No, I wasn't around then. 40,000 videos, hundreds of topics, and most importantly you, a whole 44 million of you. Our viewers. We could populate an entire country if we wanted to. We'd like to continue helping you learn and giving you useful skill improvement tips. Got a thirst for knowledge? We've prepared 4 masterclasses on creating a 2D character animation from scratch, 10 hours of video lessons, practical tasks using professional software, and additional materials that you can use with your own projects. Get the full course now and create your own animated masterpiece. Egyptian archaeologists made an extraordinary discovery near Cairo just recently. Drumroll, please. The most ancient and most complete mummy yet discovered in the country. Yes, they were keeping it under wraps. The 4,300-year-old mummy was found in a group of tombs close to the step pyramid of Djoser, dating back to the Egyptian Old Kingdom. It was covered in layers of gold. The team also found several other tombs, including one belonging to an ancient Egyptian official and another belonging to a secret keeper who had the power to perform special ceremonies. Another interesting tomb was that of a writer, which featured the largest statues ever found in the area. This vast burial site is also home to more than a dozen pyramids and resting grounds. Probably one of the most famous mummies in the world is that of Hatshepsut. She ruled Egypt like a boss for around 20 years, building all sorts of impressive buildings and creating new trade routes. But when archaeologist Howard Carter found her tomb in the Valley of the Kings, her sarcophagus was empty. However, Carter did find 2 coffins in another tomb, one of which belonged to Hatshepsut's wet nurse and the other to an unknown woman. In 2006, a team of specialists decided to investigate whether that mysterious lady was the queen herself. They found a molar tooth in a wooden box with Hatshepsut's name on it, and when they compared it to a gap in the mummy's mouth, it was a perfect match. Ramses II was a pretty impressive ruler, but it was his mummy that eventually made history. Now, we don't hear too much about his daddy. Okay, I'll stop. Ramses is considered to be the most powerful pharaoh in all of Egypt, as he reigned for a whopping 6 decades. He also lived to be over 90 years old. Now that's pretty amazing, considering the time he lived in. Ramses II supposedly had over 100 offspring too. Talk about a big family. When he passed away, his body was originally buried in the Valley of the Kings, but some sneaky guys tried to rob his tomb of all his treasures. Officials back in the day weren't having any of that though, so they moved his body to a secret location to keep it safe. Fast forward to the 1800s, and Ramses II's mummy was discovered along with a bunch of other rulers and important officials. But it wasn't in the best condition, so archaeologists flew it to Paris to get it, pampered. Problem was, he couldn't just be transported into another country. The only solution available was to give Ramses II his own passport. His occupation was listed as king, and the document even featured his photo. Most mummies aren't necessarily known for having the most hydrated skin. But that of an ancient woman, also known as Lady Di, proves otherwise. No, not that Lady Di. This wealthy lady from ancient times was discovered in an ornate tomb in 1971, and she looked fabulous, if we can say so about a mummy. Thanks to the special conditions in her tomb, like the moisture in the environment and the lack of oxygen, her body was almost perfectly preserved. Her skin was soft, her hair was on point, and she was still flexible. The museum that now proudly displays her mummy also shows a ton of fancy items that were buried with her, like dinnerware and musical instruments. Archaeologists investigated the mummy further and discovered that she passed away from a heart attack at around 50 years old. Even though it hasn't been around for over 2,000 years, Lady Di is still making history. The mummy of Otzi the Iceman was discovered in the Alps in 1991. Austrian authorities initially thought he was a modern mountaineer because he was so well preserved. Turns out, he was actually from the Copper Age. He was found in a mountain pass over 10,000 feet above sea level. Through studying his mummy, we've learned so much about life in Copper Age Europe. For example, we know that he was a native of Central Europe and enjoyed eating meat. He also suffered from arthritis, narrowing arteries, and intestinal problems. But he likely used acupuncture and medicinal herbs to treat these conditions. And apparently, he was pretty handy with tools. He sharpened them just days before his untimely demise. Who knows if he was expecting trouble or just getting ready for some routine work. Now, King Tut and his story is most likely the one that made all mummies famous. This pharaoh passed away at the young age of 19, more than 3,000 years ago. But his mummy is still one of the most well-known in the world. When his tomb was opened in 1922, people went wild because it was still intact, unlike many other royal tombs. It had some seriously blinged-out coffins, including one made of solid gold. Not only did Tut's tomb give us a glimpse into ancient Egyptian history, but his mummy also taught us a lot about the time he lived in. DNA analysis helped identify his parents and revealed that the pharaoh had a rare bone disorder that might have made walking a bit tough. Now, Ginger is most likely one of the coolest mummies you'll ever hear about. He's like a time traveler from 5,000 years ago who's still looking fly with his golden hair and perfectly preserved nails. Ginger was discovered in Egypt and is believed to be the earliest known mummified body. Before people even knew about mummification, they used to place bodies in shallow graves in the hot, dry sand. And since the sand absorbed all the water, bacteria couldn't reproduce and the body was preserved naturally. Now, scientists are not sure if Ginger's preservation was intentional or not, but since he was buried with some pottery vessels, it's likely that whoever buried him knew some serious preservation techniques. If you want to meet Ginger in person, he's currently chilling at the British Museum. One Dutch art collector bought a statue from Asia and ended up finding a weird discovery. The statue contained a mummy hidden inside. Unfortunately, the body was too fragile to move, so they had to leave it there. The coolest part is that this mummy is over 1,000 years old and was on display for 200 years before being encased in the statue. When scientists did a CT scan, they found out that the mummy was filled with paper scraps covered in writings. Experts think he might have done this thing called self-mummification, which is a pretty intense process involving a special diet and tea that makes your body less prone to bacteria. Only a few people could handle this ritual, and those who managed to do that were seriously respected. No other Egyptian queen has baffled scientists and historians like the stunning Nefertiti. Based on her statues, she was known for her slender neck, wide eyes, and high cheekbones. Her name translates to "the beautiful woman has come." Talk about living up to your name, huh? Even though she wasn't a pharaoh herself, Nefertiti still managed to leave a lasting impression. Written records suggest that, as a wife and queen, she held an incredibly influential role. Because of her power, she was indeed admired, but she also managed to make quite a lot of enemies throughout her life. She was also related to King Tut, but not biologically. Rather, she was his stepmother. So far, locals have yet to identify her mummy, but that may soon change. A local Egyptologist who has been busy excavating tombs in the Valley of the Kings has found two mummies that he believes could be Nefertiti and her daughter. According to specialists, we may soon finally get a definitive answer about the identity of these two mummies. And if one of them does turn out to be Nefertiti, we could be in for a real treat. DNA analysis and CT scans of the mummy could give us the most complete and accurate image of the queen that we've ever seen. It's crazy to think that we've only scratched the surface of what lies beneath modern-day Egypt. Nefertiti ruled during a time of great power and prosperity in Egypt, but unfortunately passed away in a period of social turmoil, leading to her gravesite being lost. Now, where's my mummy? It's March 1974. The Betts family, Jerry Antoine, and their son Terry, are walking through the woods at their estate on Fort George Island. As they enjoy their spring walk, little do they know that today they'll come across something that'll change their lives forever. As Terry walks ahead, he can feel something pulling him towards an unknown object. Unsure of what to make of this feeling, but curious to pursue whatever's calling to him. "Terry, where are you going?" his mother calls out, but he ignores her and frantically tries to find this unknown thing. He wants it, he needs it, and then he can see something. A shiny silver sphere, the size of a bowling ball, nestling among the grass. As Terry approaches it, he notices it's eerily untouched, with no damage or dirt on it. Terry picks it up. It's heavy, but he holds it tight. "Always finding junk where you go," his father laughs. Terry was always collecting strange metallic objects. He found them fascinating. "It's just a souvenir, that's all." The three of them look at the ball, all intrigued by the perfect shiny sphere. As they walk back home, they excitedly discuss its possible origins, fantasizing the possibilities that maybe it's a cannonball used by conquistadors, or that it could have fallen from a NASA satellite in orbit. They arrive home, and Terry places the mysterious ball on a windowsill in his room, next to many of his other exhibits, and it sits there for now. 2 weeks pass, and Terry has a friend over. They hang out and take turns playing the guitar. Terry strikes a chord, and a vibration occurs that comes from the windowsill. The boys sit silently, spooked by the unknown sound. They look around to find where it came from. "It's probably just a possum," Terry says calmly. But as he raises his pick, he looks towards the sphere suspiciously. As he strikes another chord, he sees the sphere vibrate, and this time, it's also emitting a humming sound. Terry puts down the guitar and approaches the ball, and as he reaches toward it, the sound slowly fades. Startled, he stands in silence before calling out to his dad. Terry explains the strange phenomenon to his father. Antoine looks at it closely, then holds it up to his ear. As he shakes it vigorously, he can feel something inside the ball moving. Shocked, he places it down on a table. Once placed, it begins to roll, moving towards one edge of the table, then circling around, moving corner to corner in a rectangle, endlessly searching for something, possibly an exit, until finally it rolls back to the middle, becoming motionless once more. They all look at the ball, puzzled by the display, and Antoine places the ball on the floor. As soon as it touches the surface, it quickly rolls toward the door. This time, it's clear the sphere wants to make an escape. The thing is too valuable to lose, and Terry quickly chases after it. He grabs it before it leaves the house. He places the ball somewhere safe inside a box, incapable of another escape attempt. Over the following days, Terry took it upon himself to make his own experiments. He found that when within the sunlight, it appeared to be more active. His opinion was that it reacted to solar radiation. When hit with a hammer, it would ring out loudly, as though it felt the strike. Strange things also occurred in the Betts family home. Doors would suddenly slam shut at night, and strange organ music played throughout the house, even though they didn't own an organ. The family sat down to discuss the sphere. They felt it was something truly extraterrestrial, and they required professional advice. The authorities came to review the ball, puzzled by the object, as it moved in an unpredictable way. But they couldn't recognize what it was or provide an explanation for it. All they could confirm was that it didn't come from another planet. The Betts family disagreed and wanted a second opinion. They sent it to Dr. J. Allen Hynek, an astronomer and expert in the extraterrestrial. He spent 6 hours reviewing the sphere. Through his many examinations, the doctor found that the strange sphere emitted radio waves and had its own magnetic field. With this new information, the Bettses were interviewed by a reporter. The mysterious sphere quickly became famous. Its story spread in papers throughout the USA and even made the news internationally. Everyone wanted to know more about this mysterious sphere. A television crew soon visited the Betts' house, hoping to experience the extraterrestrial object firsthand. The sphere was placed on the ground. It did its usual trick, and the visitors stood there, speechless at what they were witnessing. The reporters asked to place the family's poodle next to the ball to provide an indication of the sphere's size. As the dog sat next to it, it began to whimper and covered its ears with its paws, something it had never done before around the ball. The Betts family felt they had something truly valuable and insured it through Lloyd's of London, and if they left it at home, they had someone stay to watch it, ensuring no one would steal it or let it escape. But what was the mysterious Betts sphere really? When responding to the press, the spokesman from the authorities revealed the sphere was made from high-grade stainless steel. Although the sphere wasn't something they made themselves, it was still likely created somewhere on Earth. If it came from outer space, they advised it would be made from different elements. Their review showed the shell of the sphere is 1 inch thick and hollow inside. It weighed 22 pounds, the exact weight for that amount of stainless steel. It had no seams on it, the shell was scuffed in parts, and had a small triangular mark 3 millimeters long. They were sure it was just a steel ball. But they wanted to confirm further by using X-rays. They found small beads of residue inside. These beads would have been caught inside the object when it was manufactured. Clarifying why there was a feeling of movement inside the ball, they also solved the mystery of the strange movement. As it's a perfectly balanced sphere, sitting on the slightest uneven surface would cause it to roll. The Betts' house had uneven stone floors, and it had only ever been witnessed to move around there. The authority also wanted to cut it open to prove their assessment. However, the Betts' were adamant that it couldn't be damaged. It was identified further that the sphere was just a ball check valve produced by the Bell & Gossett Company. The ball's size, weight, and metallurgic composition matched perfectly to what they made. Confirming how it managed to make the journey to the Betts' estate 3 years before the discovery of the sphere, an artist, James Durling Jones, had collected a few of these ball check valves. He liked to use them in his sculptures. With no room inside of his bust, he put them on the top of the roof rack. His journey took him past the Betts' estate, and along the way, a few of these balls happened to roll off and were lost, at least until Terry came along one fine spring day. But what about the radio waves and odd magnetic properties confirmed by Dr. Hynek? Well, although Antoine claimed that's what was found, it was never confirmed to be true with the doctor. The 1970s were a heyday for all things out of our planet, and anything related would gain popularity immediately. The authorities only enhanced this by providing monetary rewards for supporting evidence. Finding something extraterrestrial could have been just a ploy by the Betts' for a cash reward.
What is a boat doing in the middle of a desert? You would expect to find a seagoing vessel closer to shore. This is the question archaeologists had been asking for decades. In 1988, there was a storm near one of the most important archaeological sites in ancient Egypt. A wooden structure emerged from the sand. It was hollowed out by termites. Scientists were determined to solve its mystery. In 2000, they began excavating the site near Abydos, Ubidos. An American team of experts soon discovered a boat that was 70 feet long, and it wasn't alone. In total, there were 14 boats neatly resting next to each other. It was impossible to completely dig out the boats because of their poor condition. Luckily, the wood was preserved enough to get a sample. Analyses revealed that the boats were around 5,000 years old, the oldest fleet in human history to this date. The time of their construction predates the pyramids at Giza by half a millennium. Each ship of the fleet rested in a vault that matched its dimensions. The room was roughly a third of the size of a tennis court. It had mud brick walls that featured more than 120 drawings of boats. Ancient Egyptians incised them on whitewashed walls that were excellently preserved. Scientists have known about these mysterious chambers for well over a century. 1901, 1902. A British archaeologist, Arthur Weigel, stumbled upon a strange structure west of the River Nile. His team caught a glimpse of the interior walls. Sadly, a section of the roof collapsed, so they had to call off further exploration. Researchers abandoned the site, but its location remained on the maps. The boat's position first led scientists to think that they rested on a bank of the mighty Nile. But there was a problem with this theory. Today, the river flows almost 7 miles west of Abydos. Further studies of the surrounding terrain showed the Nile didn't change its course throughout history. Also, if the boats floated near a dock, they would be in unstable positions. The 14 vessels at Abydos were perfectly parallel to each other. There was only one conclusion possible. Someone had deliberately placed them like that. They must have gone through a lot of effort. Each boat had enough room for up to 30 rowers. These vessels could really float. They weren't models, but scholars still don't know if they actually sailed any body of water in ancient Egypt. This doesn't diminish the importance of the find. Previously, archaeologists found only small-scale models. In King Tut's tomb alone, there were 35 boat models. For a long time, these figurines were the only clues as to how ancient Egyptian vessels looked like. The boat's design confirms that they were the real deal. They are the earliest surviving examples of something called built boats. Ancient people constructed primitive vessels by hollowing out large tree trunks. The alternative was reed that was tied together to form a raft. The boats at Abydos had planks tied together. This was a major breakthrough in shipbuilding. During their lifetime, the boats must have seemed impressive. Timber was a valuable commodity at the time. There was no wood in the desert. Cedar had to be imported from Lebanon. The only person who could afford such luxury was the pharaoh. Studying the area around the ancient fleet provided more answers. Scientists discovered a mud brick structure where Egyptians worshipped the pharaoh. Its approximate date of construction matches that of the wooden boats. The same bricks out of which this building was made were used to encase the fleet. At the time of their construction, the rooms they were stored in had a ceiling. That's the section that archaeologists stumbled upon in the early 20th century. Just like mummies and coffins, these marvelous ships rested inside splendid vaults. The exterior of these rooms was also impressive. The outer walls originally had a plaster of white limestone. It reflected sunlight. In the desert sun, the structure housing the boats must have shone from miles away. Ancient Egyptian builders used the same technique to cover the pyramids 500 years later. Today, their surface looks jagged, but it wasn't always like this. When they were constructed, the pyramids had a top layer of fine white limestone. Their surface was smooth and it gleamed in the sunlight. Instead of stairs, the outer layer of the pyramids was more of a sleek ramp. Archaeologists were left with one final question. Which pharaoh owned the fleet? The answer lay just a mile from the site. This is where the tomb of a pharaoh from the 5th dynasty rested, King Senwosret III. Its time and style of construction matched the ones of the chambers with boats. The very end of his rule might explain how the boats ended up in the middle of the desert. The pharaoh probably passed away in northern Egypt. Then his body was transported down the Nile to Abydos in a marvelous procession of decorated boats. The vessels were later lowered to chambers near the final resting place of their owner. This had a symbolic meaning. In the ancient Egyptians' belief system, ships played a key role. Their supreme deity was Ra. He traveled through the sky during the day in the form of the sun. At nighttime, he sailed through the netherworld in a solar boat. The pharaoh identified himself with Ra. That's why he needed boats in the afterlife. That was the only way to regenerate himself. Just as the sun rises every day above the horizon. This belief existed for thousands of years. The more famous Pharaoh Khufu also had a ship. Scientists found it in 1954 next to his pyramid at Giza. It is some 4 centuries younger than the fleet at Abydos, but Khufu's ship was almost 2 times longer. The Great Pyramid of Giza and King Tut's tomb are some of the most famous archaeological finds in Egypt. But there are many more secrets hiding beneath the endless sands of the Sahara Desert. Recently, 2020, archaeologists found a lost city there. They have labeled it as the most important discovery since King Tut's tomb, 1922. The city of Aten is some 3,000 years old. Historians hope it will give them a unique insight into the everyday life of ancient Egyptians. The famous archaeologist and Egyptologist Zahi Hawass proclaimed the site a lost golden city. Aten sits some 300 miles south of Egypt's capital, Cairo. It is close to the famous Valley of the Kings. Archaeologists first found sections of mud brick walls that spread out in all directions. They discovered complete rooms with tools of everyday life inside. The research team unearthed a bakery, a residential neighborhood, and an administrative district. They all date back to the time when the Egyptian civilization was the wealthiest in its long history. They were also the first to make objects from iron. In 1911, scientists found a set of iron beads near a village in Lower Egypt, El Girza. These are the earliest known iron artifacts. The discovery is literally out of this world. Ancient people made them by beating into shape a piece of a meteorite. The 9 beads were once part of an ornate necklace. They are now blackened and corroded, which is perfectly normal for a piece of jewelry that is over 5,000 years old. They consist of an iron-nickel alloy. Researchers were impressed by the skill of ancient jewelers who processed the beads. Their craftsmanship is more impressive when you think that they didn't know the stellar origins of the material. The Great Pyramid of Giza also has a remarkable feature. An international research group investigated the electromagnetic response of the structure to radio waves. They found that the pyramid has the ability to concentrate electromagnetic energy inside it. This occurred inside its chambers as well as under the pyramid's base. It contains an underground, unfinished chamber. It seems that the electromagnetic response is connected with the properties of limestone, the Great Pyramid's main building material. The research results might have a practical application. The way solar cells and nanosensors function could be improved by this remarkable find.
Care to join me on a trip down memory lane? I have an extra seat in my time machine. First stop, London in the early 1900s. If you look closely, you'll see that this city already has electric public lights. Before that, people used to light their streets with torches or oil lamps. However, those things you see inside light poles aren't the modern light bulbs we use today. At that time, city lamps did not use light bulbs yet, even though they were already invented. That's because they weren't as efficient back then, so they couldn't shed enough light to illuminate the city's dark streets. They might have been good for indoor lighting, sure, but for public use, carbon arc lamps were still a better choice at the time. Here's someone I'd like you to meet, Mr. Thomas Edison. He's mostly credited for inventing modern light bulbs. He's going to explain to us how most of these lighting inventions work. All electrical sources of light back then had a simple, basic principle. Electricity needed to pass through some sort of material. This material had to be stable and durable, and it was supposed to glow when connected to a power source. The first invention of this kind was called the arc lamp. In this contraption, the material used for lighting was carbon, and as soon as it was electrically charged, it began to vaporize. This process produced some really bright light. The man behind this invention was a British chemist named Humphrey Davy. He placed together 2 wires, a battery, and charcoal elements, which gave away enough light to illuminate the surroundings. But even those arc lamps weren't suitable for street lighting at first, mostly because they were inefficient. They needed a powerful electrical current to produce light, so they had to be equipped with large batteries to back up that amount of power. It all made arc lamps difficult to operate and also very expensive. Mr. Edison's name is the one you've certainly heard in relation to the invention of the light bulb. The truth is, his discoveries are only a part of this revolutionary invention. Other scientific breakthroughs, like those of Alessandro Volta, Humphrey Davy, and Joseph Swan, also contributed. Before moving forward with our story, let's look at how modern light bulbs work. Each of them has 2 primary parts. The first one is a hollow chamber, the glass part, that's filled with an inert gas. This type of gas is crucial because it does not interact with other chemical substances, creating something similar to a vacuum environment. The second part is a thin filament, or a conductive wire. It's the part of the bulb where you can see electricity. A metal called tungsten is often chosen for making filaments these days because of its very high melting point. It makes light bulbs more durable. Once you turn on a light bulb, electricity flows through the filament, which heats up the environment. This heat quickly causes the very thin tungsten filament to give off huge amounts of light. Now let's get back to our story and Mr. Edison. When looking at previous discoveries, he noticed that the problem with the light bulb's efficiency was related to its filament. To make it more practical, the filament needed to be thinner. Why? Because the thinner the filament, the less electrical current it needs to work properly. This could solve the problem with the added batteries and generators. So, by the late 1870s, Edison came up with a light bulb that featured a platinum filament in a glass vacuum bulb. Edison and his team went on to test more than 3,000 designs for light bulbs between the years 1878 and 1880. He ended up trying more than 6,000 plants to see which material would be better suited to serve as a filament. Everything was tried out, from cotton to linen and even wood. Eventually, they figured out that a carbonized bamboo filament could burn for more than 1,000 hours. They settled on this material for a while, but longer-lasting materials, like tungsten, replaced it by the early 1900s. These days, standard light bulbs can last anywhere between 1,000 to 2,000 hours. But there is one light bulb that is famous for breaking all the records. The story has it that back in 1901, a small light bulb was placed on the ceiling of a fire station in Livermore, California. It was a 60-watt light bulb used at the time to illuminate the fire department's trucks, even during the day. That's why it was almost never turned off. This may be one of the reasons why it lasted as long as it did. Another reason for such longevity is its composition. The filament of this particular light bulb was made not of tungsten, but of carbon. Unlike metals, carbon conducts electricity better when heated. More so, such a filament is way thicker than those we see in modern light bulbs. Needless to say, this light bulb has been functioning ever since. It's now over 100 years old. It even has its own official website, although it hasn't been updated since 2018. These days, we call it the Centennial Bulb, and the reason why so many people celebrate this invention is because of its incredible ability to withstand the test of time. Wouldn't it be great if all light bulbs lasted that long? Unfortunately, they won't, because it goes against a business strategy often used these days. It's called planned obsolescence. As interesting as it may sound, it's actually a trick. It centers around products that are made to last a certain limited amount of time. These products stop working artificially, and the amount of time they function properly is set from the very beginning. Eventually, you'll need to repair or replace them, and in the long run, people end up buying more products. Let's look at the example of the Centennial Bulb. If all similar devices were designed to last over 100 years, people would eventually stop buying them. A whole industry would disappear, at least for the foreseeable future. So a businessman from London came up with a plan back in 1932. He named it planned obsolescence. It mentioned that selling products with a limited lifetime meant that more objects would be purchased in the long run. He thought that in the overall economy, as long as there was a stable supply and demand trade-off, it was a win-win situation. His idea saw a lot of negative reactions throughout the years, and for a good reason. I mean, it's really annoying to keep having to buy new products when it's not really necessary. Also, it means a lot of wasted products too. There are a lot of ways for a product to become outdated, and some are less obvious than you think. Look at some of the gadgets in your house, like a phone, a computer, or even a washing machine, and check if you can identify some of these examples. For example, these products may lack spare parts. These ones are purposely designed to act as a whole unit. You can't simply take it apart and replace the element that has stopped working. In other words, these products can't be fixed. Once they're broken, you simply need to replace them. Light bulbs are actually a good example of such products. Ever tried replacing a filament in a light bulb once it stopped working? I mean, the glass jar might still be useful, but there's no way you can bring a light bulb back to life at home once the filament is broken. Then there are products that simply become incompatible with other modern re-editions. It's a process we witness more and more often these days because technology is advancing at a speed we've never seen before. For example, one day, you may realize that there are no software updates available for a specific device. You might notice that if your phone is old enough, some apps just won't work anymore. That's because, in most cases, they are using newer technologies, which aren't compatible with older devices.
On January 10, 1992, a huge cargo ship sailed somewhere in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It got caught in a strong storm. Its waves battered the ship frightfully, and some of its containers fell into the water. One of them opened and released some 29,000 rubber toys. There were yellow ducks, frogs, and blue turtles. From that moment, their journey of almost 20,000 miles across the world's oceans began. This enormous number of toys survived many years of storms, salt water, encounter with marine animals, and countless days under the scorching sun. The ducks even ventured into the icy waters of the Arctic and swam through the spot where the Titanic sank. Some of the toys settled in Hawaii, and some went to the shores of England. Many people watched their journey all the time. Oceanologists studied ocean currents with the help of this migrating flock of rubber duckies. People authored books about these ducks. Each toy is an artifact, and somebody managed to find at least one of them. One frog washed up on the coast of England, and other toys were found in the ocean. People are looking for them and selling them for thousands of dollars. Until now, these wanderers are floating somewhere out there, and you may find one of them sometime. I keep mine close by. You know what ammonite is? It's a kind of a big ancient seashell with a spiral on its back. So, the coast of Washington hides many fossils of these animals. One day, a group of scientists went there to find these prehistoric things. But instead, they found a massive bone of an unknown dinosaur. The problem was that the fossil was stuck in a coastal rock. Paleontologists dragged a stone saw to get the find. They extracted the bone and discovered it belonged to an animal that lived about 80 million years ago. It was a theropod, a predatory dinosaur that moved on two legs. T-Rex and velociraptors belonged to this species. It's not proven exactly who this bone belonged to, but researchers say the descendants of these dinosaurs are modern birds. In 2008, on the shore of Brighton Beach, people discovered probably one of the most unusual things that have ever been thrown on the shore. This was a big 8-foot Lego man. He was whole and looked great. It's unknown how long he stayed in the ocean and ended up here. The discovery attracted the attention of locals and the district administration. The Lego man looked so cool on the beach that the people at City Hall decided to leave him there. Nobody knows the true story of this giant toy. Some say that Lego Man arrived from Denmark. There's a Legoland theme park. Maybe the toy came straight from there. Others are sure that it fell from some passing ship. See rubber duckies. But of course, there's a high probability that this is all part of a PR campaign. Even if it's not, it's still a great ad. In 2010, locals found a giant tree washed up on the beach on the shore of La Push, Washington. Several people could fit inside its trunk. There's enough room to squeeze in a bed, a table, a TV, and even throw a small party. And the height of the tree itself reached about 200 feet. This is almost the size of a Boeing passenger jet. There were a lot of discarded trees on the shore that day, but this giant was the king among them. High tides and fierce winds brought it ashore. Storms occur often in this region. During this time, rivers flowing through the area spill over the forest and dump large trees. Also, near the beach, there are high slopes with tropical forests. At high tide, the water washes away the trees and brings them to the shore. Now, they didn't know the exact type of tree, but it was like the Sitka spruce, red cedar, and Douglas fir. In 2020, a giant squid was found on a shore of a South African beach. Such finds are rare because giant squids live in deep, dark waters. The beached sea creature was almost 14 feet long. This is more than the size of a passenger car. Some of these individuals can reach the size of buses. It's not surprising that sailors called these monsters kraken in the distant past. They have enormous tentacles, beak-like mouths, and the most giant eyes in the animal world. One such eye can be the size of a football. In 2021, a family found an old closed bottle on a beach in Hawaii. And of course, there was a message written 37 years ago inside. The letter was written in English. Then it turned out that school students at one Japanese school wrote this message. Back in 1984, the school released about 450 bottles into the ocean to study ocean currents. The letter had an address with a request to give it back. Now, about 50 bottles have been returned to that school in Japan. But this message, found on the shore of Hawaii, is the first since 2002. Imagine you're walking along the shore and suddenly see something strange in the distance. It looks like a giant starfish with large dark green tentacles. The center of this star has a strange red glow. The object is fenced with tape. There are people in protective suits around. It happened in May 2022 on Bondi Beach, Australia. On that day, journalists and many tourists came to the shore to find out that the unknown creature was just a sculpture made as an ad for one famous American TV series. In England, a 180-million-year-old fossil was found on Charmouth Beach. This was one of the oldest finds in the world, and this was just not a bone, but almost the whole skeleton of a huge underwater lizard, Ichthyosaurus. Let's just call him Icky. The size of this fossil was 40 feet long. It's practically the length of a small bus. The lizard's head alone was 7 feet. That's the average height of a professional basketball player, who aren't fossils. Icky was not only one of the oldest, but also one of the most giant ancient skeletons ever discovered by people. Just imagine how it swam in the seas and oceans and terrified all the sea creatures 180 million years ago. No thanks. On February 16, 2020, locals found a large cargo ship stuck on a rocky shore off the coast of an Irish village. It was old, rusty, with holes in the body and rotten parts. Kinda like me. The day before, though, it wasn't there. There was nothing valuable or exciting on board, just some old barrels of fuel. People didn't find any records or logs. Who owned the ship? Who was the captain? Where was the whole crew? No one had the answers to these questions. Soon the press wrote about the ship, and someone called the village administration and introduced themselves as the owner. That person didn't supply any evidence and hung up. Of course, no one took the ship, but after a while, people began to reveal the story of this mysterious vessel. It's called Alta. 5 months before the final stop on the coast of Ireland, it was seen thousands of miles away in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean. That day, the big ship MS Protector was sailing through calm waters and spotted Alta. The MS Protector crew tried to contact it, but no one answered. Even then, the vessel was empty. It was a phantom ship. It's still unknown how it could cover the distance across the Atlantic and surf to the coast of Ireland. Maybe it's just luck. It's also notable that no one else has seen the ship all this time. It just calmly sailed huge distances, surviving storms. But then, added information appeared. Alta had changed several captains and flags. It was used by smugglers for illegal purposes. It visited the shores of Africa and Greece. One day, several members of the Alta crew sent a distress signal. They ran out of food and water supplies. There was a breakdown inside the engine. People were rescued, and the ship remained wandering in the ocean. The owner of the boat was never found. A piece of whale rib has recently been found in a North Carolina mine. Not a big deal, some might think. Hey, why can't a whale be a miner, right? But this fragment offers scientists a unique glimpse at the interactions between prehistoric sharks and whales from around 3 to 4 million years ago. The thing is, 3 tooth marks embellish the rib. That means that the whale was once badly bitten by an animal with a super powerful jaw. Judging by the spacing between the tooth marks, and it reaches almost 2.5 inches. This animal could be a megatoothed shark. I'm talking about the megalodon. Or it could be a different shark species which was around at that time. The curvature of the shark's jaw shows that the animal was relatively small, between 13 and 20 feet long. Yeah, small. As for the whale, it seems to be the ancestor of a great blue or humpback whale. Researchers are amazed. You don't usually expect to find evidence of animal interaction and behavior preserved in the fossil record. After examining the sample carefully, they concluded that the shark must have gone away with a mouthful, but the whale had survived because most of the fossil fragment is covered with what is known as woven bone. It quickly forms in response to localized infection. Such bone isn't particularly strong, and later the body remodels it into compact bone tissue. But it takes time. The presence of this bone means that the healing was incomplete and the whale passed away 2 to 6 weeks after the unfortunate encounter. On the other hand, its demise could have been unrelated to the infection and injury. Only a handful of fossils show such kinds of interactions between ancient animals. You can often find bite marks on fossils indicating where the animal passed away and its carcass was scavenged. But this fossil is one of a few examples that not only show a wound inflicted by another animal, but also demonstrate that the prey survived. All fossils are exciting for paleontologists. Yes, they need to get out more. But some might look terrifying to regular people. For example, look at this picture of tentacle arms and octagonal-shaped heads. When it first appeared in mass media, internet users claimed that it was some ancient organism that had come from space. Others thought the story was fake. But in fact, both the picture and the fossil are real. The fossil is known as a mortality plate, a fossilized representation of a mass extinction event of one or several species. The fossil actually contains more than a dozen specimens of a type of marine organism called a crinoid. Despite their looks, crinoids were not plants but marine animals. This particular species lived deep underwater on the seafloor. Crinoids were related to starfish, sea urchins, and brittle stars. These creatures could attach themselves to the seafloor with stalks made up of flexible porous discs connected by soft tissue. The stalks were hollow, and that's where the animal's nervous system was located. Crinoids absorbed oxygen through thin-walled tube feet. The creatures usually reached the length of more than 8 inches and had 5 arms lined with leathery-looking tentacle-like structures. They fed on plankton and sloughed off organic material. Now, even though these fossil finds seem to be super exciting, few creatures in the fossil record confuse scientists as much as the Tully monster. This curious sea creature sported a toothy, trunk-like snout and eyes splayed out on a rigid rod. But the most bizarre thing? It has been impossible to classify. Researchers have been considering a variety of organisms, for example, segmented worms, swimming slugs, and primitive eel-like creatures, since the monster was discovered in 1966. Recently, they have even tried to connect it to some species of jawless fish with a backbone-like structure. A team of scientists from Japan has used high-resolution laser scanners to examine the anatomy of Tully monster fossils in 3D. They concluded that the enigmatic fossil might be an invertebrate after all, and still, the true identity of the creature remains elusive. In the 1950s, amateur fossil hunter Francis Tully found a ghostly imprint of a torpedo-shaped organism with a huge tail fin in the Mizon Creek fossil beds in Illinois. Tully had never seen anything similar to the torpedo structure. He took his find to Chicago's Field Museum of Natural History. Paleontologists working there were baffled as well. Since then, scientists haven't been able to determine where the creature fits on the phylogenetic family tree, or where they should spend Thanksgiving. In 1741, an explorer and captain named Vitus Johansen Bering led an expedition to map the coast of Alaska. The ship he was on got shipwrecked on what later became known as Bering Island, and they got hungry. Half the crew survived thanks to the discovery of an extremely large sea cow. With the meat of these animals nourishing them, the sailors managed to build a small ship from the wreckage and return home. On their way back, a scientist who was among them spent his time documenting the animals and plants they had found. The sea cow was particularly interesting because without it, the crew wouldn't have survived. These animals were more than 26 feet long and weighed around 10 tons. All sea cows are member of the order Sirenia, marine mammals more closely related to elephants than cows. The scientists described them as having black skin, a small head, and stubby forelimbs. Those sea cows floated on the water's surface, munching on kelp. After the information about these animals became widespread, sea otter fur trading expeditions made use of that convenient depot en route. Sea cows were docile and could be easily hunted. Long story short, within 27 years after the scientists mentioned those animals, they were driven to extinction. But it's not the saddest part. The fossil record reveals a much deeper and darker history. Fossils of sea cows have been discovered all over the world, from Japan to Mexico. It means that the animal once thrived in the vast kelp beds around the entire North Pacific Rim. That small population discovered by the expedition was probably the last remains of a once much larger and way healthier population. More likely, Aboriginal hunting had already reduced the numbers of these animals to near extinction levels, and the final blow came from Western hunters. The living close relatives of those ancient sea cows are rarely hunted today. Still, they're under threat of extinction themselves. To some, this amazing fossil might look a bit disturbing. Slaves' lentils are fossils that belong to animals called nummalites. They lived and thrived in a warm, shallow sea covering part of Egypt around 40 million years ago. The name nummalites hints at the fact that larger specimens resemble coins, and in Egyptian folklore, they're even referred to as angel's money. These creatures have a simple, single-celled structure, which contrasts with their super intricate skeleton. Look at this series of spiral overlapping whorls. Each whorl is divided into countless tiny chambers. Nummalites can grow to be 4 inches in diameter, and still, they are the fossils of single-celled animals related to amoeba. How and why did they grow to be so large? The reason could be their symbiotic relationships with other smaller organisms. In the case of modern species, such symbionts are tiny golden-brown single-celled algae called diatoms. The shells of nummalites are relatively transparent, and since they're flat, there's a large surface area for the light needed for the diatoms to photosynthesize. For some reasons, scientists are still debating about them. The presence of plant symbionts in animals dwelling in the sea encourages the growth of a calcareous skeleton in hosts. So, the gigantic size of the nummalites in Egypt could be due to their close relationship with symbiotic diatoms. Does that make sense? Fun fact: a species of nummalites evolve very fast, and their fossils change from one layer of sediments to the next. So, the limestone used for the pyramids of Giza are so packed with such fossils that it's known as nummulitic limestone. This limestone also contains 2 kinds of nummalites, the smaller slave's lentils and the larger angel's money. But those are not different species, but rather different stages in the life cycle of a single species.
On April 10, 1912, the RMS Titanic set sail from England. But this wasn't the launch of a regular ship. The Titanic was the largest liner ever built at the time. It was 882 feet long. That's nearly the size of 3 soccer fields. And measured from the hull to the top of the smokestacks, the ship was an impressive 175 feet tall. That's the size of a 17-story building. Deemed unsinkable, it took 3,000 workers almost 3 years to build. But a mere 4 days into its very first voyage, at 11:40 p.m., the ship collided with an iceberg and was lost beneath the waves of the Atlantic Ocean. It took the liner only 2 hours and 40 minutes to sink. And of more than 2,200 passengers and crew members on board, only 706 survived. The wreck would remain lost for another 73 years, hiding its many secrets within the frigid Atlantic waters. And if it wasn't for a man whose whole life had been devoted to exploring the sea, the giant ship might have remained lost for a lot longer. That man was Robert Ballard. As a child, Ballard was obsessed with the ocean. This fascination started when he was just 12 years old. That's when he watched a film adaptation of Jules Verne's science fiction novel 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It had everything to spark a young person's imagination, from adventure and strange creatures to a powerful underwater vehicle called the Nautilus. It could travel anywhere in the world you wanted to go. From that moment, life on dry land was no longer in Ballard's future. When he was 23, he was assigned to the Deep Submergence Group. There, he helped develop techniques to search the ocean floor. His biggest accomplishment was the creation of Alvin. It was a small, easy-to-maneuver submarine that could carry 3 people. It also featured an external mechanical arm designed to gather underwater samples while the crew remained safe and dry inside. Alvin the submarine quickly proved useful for a variety of tasks. For example, once it was used to track down an aircraft that had crashed into the sea. But the vessel experienced a series of setbacks. In one case, it was attacked by a swordfish, which caused the submarine to resurface quickly. The swordfish, still stuck in the outer skin of the submarine, became that night's dinner. And in October 1968, the submarine was being lowered into the water when the cables holding it snapped, sending it careening into the ocean along with 3 crew members on board. And because the small vessel was still open, it immediately filled with water and quickly began to sink. Luckily, the crew managed to escape, but Alvin was gone. Bad weather hampered multiple attempts to recover the vessel. It wasn't until the following year that it was finally returned to the surface. In time, Alvin would be improved. Its hull would be strengthened by titanium, giving it a higher depth rating, thus making it even better suited for ocean exploration. The specialized submarine would come in handy in many of Ballard's 100-plus expeditions. The man was one of the first to explore an underwater mountain chain called the Mid-Atlantic Ridge in the Atlantic Ocean. And when he found thermal vents in the Galapagos Rift in the late 70s, he also helped discover and document the process of chemosynthesis. That's a complicated chemical synthesis of food energy by bacteria. But his biggest discovery was still to come. Ballard claimed he'd never been a Titanic fanatic, but he eventually became obsessed with finding the ship after watching other explorers try and fail. As he said, Titanic was clearly the big Mount Everest at the time. Many others had tried, many that I thought would have succeeded, or should have succeeded but didn't. Ballard began thinking about finding the ship as early as 1973, and 4 years later, he actually made an attempt. He used the deep-sea salvage vessel Sea Probe, which was a drill ship equipped with cameras and sonar. But he was forced to give up when the drilling pipe broke. It just wasn't his time. In the early 80s, a Texas oil man named Jack Grimm tried to find the wreck on 3 different occasions. Once, Grimm was actually right over the Titanic, but his equipment failed to detect it. That's what we call extreme bad luck. Ballard was just biding his time. He needed a plan and some help. The first issue was getting down to the bottom of the Atlantic. The furthest down he had ever traveled before was 20,000 feet, and this trip took him 3 hours, and that didn't include the way back up. Ballard knew he could use Alvin, already enhanced with a titanium hull to withstand the pressure of the ocean. But he also needed something that didn't require him to actually go down with it. An unpiloted remote-controlled submarine would be ideal. But first, he would have to create one. He reached out to the authorities, hoping they would provide funding for his project. And though officials had no interest in the Titanic, they were willing to help. But there was a catch. Ballard had to first focus on tracking down 2 submarines, the Thresher and the Scorpion, which had sunk to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean in the 1960s. The authorities were hoping to study them to find out why they had sunk in the first place. They also wanted to know if they could be recovered or if it was safe to leave them on the ocean floor. Only when he had successfully completed this task would he be free to use any remaining time on his contract to find the Titanic. With no other options for funding, Ballard took the offer. He got to work. First, he created 2 new devices. Argo was an unpiloted deep-towed undersea video camera sled. It was designed to take photos and record videos from a series of cameras mounted on it. It could work at depths of up to 20,000 feet, and it could also explore nearly 98% of the ocean floor. Argo was supposed to be tethered to a boat. As the boat moved, Argo would be pulled behind, floating just above the ocean floor. The camera would then transmit images to the surface. The second device was a small robotic vehicle called Jason Jr. It was also controlled remotely, which allowed the crew inside a submarine, like Alvin, to get closer to and photograph underwater objects. Ballard was now ready. He knew he had to find those submarines quickly, and it didn't take him long. Much to his relief, the search was relatively simple, and he was able to fulfill his obligations with 12 days to spare. With almost 2 weeks to devote to finding the Titanic, he set out to explore the ocean. He focused the search close to Newfoundland, Canada, pulling Argo along the ocean floor and reviewing the images it collected. And after a few days of nothing, they eventually found riveted hull plates and a boiler. Could this be it? The next day, a ship's large bow was revealed. On September 1st, 1985, Ballard and his fellow crew members realized they had finally found the infamous ship. The discovery resulted in a mix of emotions. Ballard was excited to be the first to find the Titanic's final resting place, but he was also overwhelmed by the sense of grief for those who had suffered when the ship had gone down. Over the next 4 days, the crew explored the wreck. They found the crow's nest, from where the iceberg had first been spotted. Plus, there was finally evidence of how the massive ship had split in two before sinking, with both halves of the ship found. There was furniture and dinnerware, and sadly, several leather shoes of those who hadn't made it to safety were scattered about the ocean floor. Ballard succeeded where others had failed and became an instant celebrity around the world. You'd think that locating the Titanic would be enough for one man, but not for Ballard. In 2019, he took on the challenge of solving another mystery, the disappearance of Amelia Earhart. Earhart had attempted to be the first woman to fly around the world. Unfortunately, she disappeared somewhere over the Pacific Ocean in 1937. She and her plane were never found. Ballard hoped that his luck with the Titanic would help with finding where Earhart had gone down, but his expedition failed to find anything. And though Robert Ballard has found more shipwrecks than anybody else, it's only the tip of the iceberg. It's estimated that there are over 3 million shipwrecks in the ocean, and Ballard has only located 100 of them. Now, in his late 70s, the man is hoping to encourage young people to continue his work of exploring the ocean and its many mysteries. In 1989, he started the Jason Learning Project to inspire grade school students to pursue science, technology, engineering, and math. He has his own research vessel called the EV Nautilus, after the name of the submarine in Jules Verne's novel, a fitting tribute to the story that inspired his career.
Mirror check. You've got your beige parka on, your chisel is packed, and your overnight plane ride to Saudi Arabia is booked. You know what this means, right? Unfortunately, you weren't cast in the remake of Dune. It just means that you're ready to go explore the world's largest desert areas in the hopes of uncovering prehistoric secrets about our ancestors. Let's get one thing straight. If you ever thought that deserts were empty spaces, think again. They might be filled with sand as far as the eye can see, but they also hold a lot of history, you know, because before humans settled down in cities and towns, we were nomadic people, and we traveled all around the globe looking for food, water, and shelter. So we had to come up with some interesting stuff to survive. Like this thing that was found in the desert of Saudi Arabia. Do you have any idea what this could have been? Over many years, scientists have discussed the origins and use of huge structures such as these ones. It seems our Neolithic ancestors were way smarter than we gave them credit for. They didn't spend all their hours around the fire carving weapons out of stone. No, they were also practicing their architectural skills. These huge stone structures are called desert kites, because if you look at them from a distance, well, they sort of look like kites. Archaeologists have arrived at the consensus that these kites were used to lure animals in. This way, it would make it easier for our ancestors to guarantee their week's food. But that's not all. Take a look at these monolithic structures right here. They show us that our ancestors probably drew on rocks, the blueprint of what they were going to build on the ground. Just like modern-day architects, desert kites could be miles long, so they drew out a plan before actually building them. The most surprising feature of all is that these kites were built even before things such as Stonehenge. We're talking around 7,000 to 9,000 years ago. Over the last decade, scientists have been able to identify over 6,000 desert kites spread across the Middle East and West and Central Asia. If you don't think this huge, try building something this large without the help of any drones. It looks like a pretty difficult feat to me. And apparently, Saudi Arabia's desert is filled with more amazing things. Scientists have found mysterious stone structures that are older than the pyramids of Giza in Egypt. So of course, you can't wait to go check that out. Can we all agree that carrying around heavy rocks to build a pyramid without the help of modern technology sounds absurd? I mean, how on earth did they do it? Now imagine turning back the clock about 2,000 years into the past and finding humans that built similar gigantic structures in isolated areas. Take a look at these so-called mustadils. They are rectangular structures built from piled-up stones, found over 77,000 square miles. Some archaeologists believe that these monuments were used for ritualistic purposes, maybe processions of some kind, where people would walk from one end of the plateau to the other. I'd be down for that. Now let's move on to another deserted area. We're entering the world-famous Sahara Desert landscape. Isn't it beautiful? Here, you're about to unravel an ancient mystery, something that took years for researchers to solve. Fun fact, the Sahara Desert is the world's largest hot desert. It spans over 3 million square miles, which would be like putting 1,000 times the country of Hawaii next to each other. We say it's the largest hot desert because the world's largest desert area is Antarctica. But we all know temperatures over there are freezing, not the typical image of when we think of a desert. Deep into the desert, near the Algerian town of Fougeret et Zoua, something strange was found. For decades, these tiny dots appeared on images of Google Earth, but nobody could explain what they were. Some scientists were sure that these circles are the result of oil activity in the region. Others guessed that these were ancient fogeras or ancient water wells. There are dozens of them, stretching for miles and miles in a straight line. The strange thing is that they are always far away from any town, road, or human activity in general. So what was or is their purpose? If you had to take a guess, what would you say? Remember we talked about how our ancestors had to be creative in order to survive in the desert? Let's try to walk in their shoes for a minute. Imagine you're a nomadic hunter-gatherer living in a desert area. You spend your days basking in the hot sun, trying to count all the grains of sand around you. But you also need to eat and drink water. But how on earth do you get water in a desert? Sure, you can hope to keep running into oasis every week or so, but that seems a bit risky, doesn't it? That's why North African people invented the so-called fogeras. The fogeras are a 2,500-year-old irrigation system. Locals would dig deep wells in elevated areas, wells deep enough to tap into underground water. Then, they would dig parallel shafts at regular distances. This way, the water would flow from the main well down into all the shafts and irrigate entire areas. Travelers could stop by the shafts and quench their thirst. They could also raise livestock and tend to crops. Pretty clever, huh? As much as these holes did look like fogaras, a little bit of research would show you that they're not. You see, these shafts were built in a line, and not in a circular shape like the ones we're looking at now. So maybe it has something to do with the second option? Maybe these desert holes were related to oil activity in the region? Let's have a look at the holes up close and personal. From Google Earth, they don't seem that big, but in real life, they are huge craters. The tip to uncovering what they are is hidden beneath the sand. If you were one of the researchers originally uncovering the truth behind this mystery, you would have found something unique hidden in the sand. Old dynamites and vintage sardine cans. Putting the pieces of the puzzle together, scientists found that these sardine cans were a model from the 1950s and 1960s. It seems that entire teams from that decade would camp out while they surveyed the area for oil. And what about the dynamites? These were used for seismic surveying. This is an old technique, used to identify if there is oil and gas beneath the Earth's surface. Still in North Africa, you find out about another desert mystery worth exploring. Near the city of Tiaret, southwest of Algeria's capital, one runs into 13 peculiar monuments. These structures are also called jedars, and yes, I am aware of how much that may sound like a Star Wars reference. They are pyramid-like in their shapes, and as far as scientists know, They were used as final resting places for the people who lived in the region. Can you guess who these were? Most likely the Berber nomads. And since we're talking about ancient stuff, they were probably built between the 4th and 7th centuries CE. Once scientists began to explore the insides of these monuments, they found they were pretty big inside. They found large underground vaults, chambers, and labyrinth-like corridors that gave way to over 20 compartments. It could take you up to 2 hours to walk around in them, and apparently our ancestors also used its walls to depict images of animals and hunting scenes. There's no definite proof of what these jadars were used for, though. This is so neat, huh? I'm sure that our world's desert is filled with many more mysterious things for us